Prefaces of 25-cent dinners for families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 25-cent dinners for families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Preface to the revised and enlarged edition. During the time that this little book has been a candidate for public favor, it has attained a success far beyond the expectations of its most sanguine advocates, and in issuing this revised and enlarged edition, the author returns her sincere thanks to both press and public, who have so substantially seconded her efforts for culinary reform. In this edition, an additional chapter has been devoted to the preparation of fruit for dessert, with special reference to the needs of American housewives. Most American ladies prepare fruit for table use either by canning it or making it into rich and expensive preserves. While both of these methods are palatable and available for winter use, the receipts given in the closing chapter will provide a welcome variety for serving fresh fruits at the table, and will tend to increase the healthy consumption of those abundant and excellent domestic productions, while they cannot fail to decrease the deplorable prevalence of that objectionable national compound, the pie. Recent investigations concerning retail prices in different sections of the country confirm the author in estimate of cost given in this work. In certain localities, some of the articles quoted are more expensive, while others are cheaper, but the average is about equal. Preface to Economical Housewives. The wide publicity to the press in different sections of the country has given to my offer to show working people earning $1.50 or less per day how to get a good dinner for 15 cents has brought me a great many letters from those who earn more and can consequently afford a more extended diet. In response to their requirements, I have written this book, which I hope will be found serviceable in that middle department of cookery it is designed to occupy, where we begin to look for more than the absolute necessaries of life. It is a practical guide to the economical, healthful, and palatable preparation of food, and will serve to show that it is possible to live well upon a very moderate income. It is necessary to repeat in this book some of the directions given in the work on 15-cent dinners, but I hope their reappearance will be pardoned on the ground of their usefulness, and also because the first book will fail to reach many for whom this one is intended. The cheapest kinds of food are sometimes the most wholesome and strengthening, but in order to obtain all their best qualities, we must know how to choose them for their freshness, goodness, and suitability to our needs. That done, we must know how to cook them, so as to make savory and nutritious meals instead of tasteless or sodden messes, the eating whereof sends the man to the liquor shop for consolation. Good food, properly cooked, gives us good blood, sound bones, healthy brains, strong nerves, and firm flesh, to say nothing of good tempers and kind hearts. These are surely worth a little trouble to secure. The first food of nearly all living creatures is milk, the only entire natural food. That is, the only food upon which health and strength can be sustained for any length of time without using any other nourishment. For this reason, it is the best food you can give children if you must restrict their diet at all, and it is also a valuable addition to the food of grown persons. While this fact about milk is settled, it is generally acknowledged by people who study the subject that we thrive best on a variety. We get warmth and strength from fat meat, wheat, rye, barley, rice, milk, sugar, fruit, peas, beans, lentils, macaroni, and the roots of vegetables. We gain flesh from lean meat, unbolted flour, oatmeal, eggs, cheese, and green vegetables. And, if we want to think clearly, we must use fish, poultry, the different grains, and a good variety of fruit and vegetables. The food most generally in use among the masses is just that which meets their requirements. No hungry man will spend money for what he knows will not satisfy his appetite, and a natural appetite may always be trusted. For that reason, the receipts given in this book treat of the articles in common use, with the exception of lentils and macaroni, which are foods that I earnestly beg all to try. In meals made up of bacon, potatoes and bread, of corned beef and cabbage, and of pork and beans, there exists an equal and sufficient amount of nourishment. But if other dishes are added to these, the variety will result in better general health and contentment. If we were to live day after day on rice, bread, potatoes, or any one other article of food, we would not long be strong enough for any kind of work. In matters of diet, variety is not only the spice of life, it is the necessity. In estimating cost, I have naturally supposed that the family consists of father, mother, and children of different ages, and not of 6 adults. For them, the quantities given would, of course, be insufficient. I allow a meat dinner every day, but in order to have this, the meat itself must generally be used one day with bread or vegetables, and the next day the breakfast must be the broth or juice of the meat, which, if prepared according to my directions, will afford equal nourishment. I wish to call your attention to the following important fact. The hardy and thrifty working classes of France, the country where the most rigid economy in regard to food is practiced, never use tea or coffee for breakfast, and seldom use milk. Their food and drink is broth. Not the broth from fresh meat, for they do not often eat that, but that which is made from vegetables, and perhaps a bit of bacon or salt pork. If you will reflect on the reasons I give in the next chapter for boiling food instead of roasting or baking it, you will learn 2 important lessons in economy, namely, that boiling saves at least 1/4 the volume of food, and that the broth which is produced, when properly managed, always gives the foundation for another meal. You should always bear in mind that the object of cooking is to soften and disintegrate food, so that it can be easily masticated, and to expand it, so as to present a large surface to the action of the digestive organs. In this connection, you must open your eyes to certain physiological facts if you want your food to agree with you. I shall not tell you more, and perhaps not so much as you ought to know and to teach your children. In calculating the cost of the receipts I give you, I have used the retail prices asked in Washington Market and in ordinary grocery stores at this season of the year. The average is about the same as that of past years, and probably will not change much, so that, I believe, I have not placed too low an estimate upon them. At the first glance, it may seem impossible to buy healthy meat at the prices I give, but you must remember that I speak of the good, second quality of meat, and that the marketing must be done with economy and in low-priced localities. It can be done, for I have done it myself. Go to packing houses and provision stores for meats, to German greengroceries for vegetables and fruit, and to specialty stores for butter, sugar, tea, etc. In conclusion, I only have to say that I hope my little book will be useful to everyone who consults it. Juliet Corson, New York Cooking School. End of Prefaces.
How do you find this book? Any thoughts about the book or the author? Any suggestion for improvement? Please take a moment to share your thoughts in a comment. If you like it, share it with your friends who might enjoy it as well. Subscribe to keep in touch. Visit CompleteAudiobooks.com for more quality content.
Chapter 1 of 25-Cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Colleen McMahon. 25-Cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 1. Marketing. The most perfect meats are taken from well-fed, full-grown animals that have not been overworked, underfed, or hard-driven. The flesh is firm, tender, and well-flavored, and abounds in nutritious elements. On the other hand, the flesh of hard-worked or ill-fed creatures is tough, hard, and tasteless. All animal flesh is composed of albumin, fibrin, and gelatin in the proportion of about 1/5 of its weight. The balance of its substance is made up of the juice, which consists of water, and those soluble salts and phosphates which are absolutely necessary for the maintenance of health. It is this juice which is extracted from beef in the process of making beef tea, and it is the lack of it in salted meats that makes them such an injurious diet when eaten for any length of time to the exclusion of other food. The flesh of young animals is less nutritious and less easily masticated than that of full-grown animals on account of its looser texture. Beef, which has firmer and larger fibers than mutton, is harder to digest on that account, but it contains an excess of strengthening elements that is not approached by any meat save that of the leg of pork. The tongues of various animals, the fibers of which are small and tender, are nutritious and digestible. The heart is nutritious because it is composed of solid flesh, but the density of its fiber interferes with its digestibility. The other internal organs are very nutritious and very useful as food for vigorous persons on that account, and because they are cheap. The blood of animals abounds in nutritive elements. The possibility of its use as a general food has closely engaged the attention of European scientists, notably of the members of the University of Copenhagen, who recommend its use in the following forms, in which it is not only suitable for food, but also capable of preservation for an indefinite time. First, as sausages, puddings, and cakes, being mixed with fat, meal, sugar, salt, and a few spices, to serve as a much cheaper substitute for meat, and intended especially for the use of the poor classes. And second, as blood chocolate, more especially suitable to be used in hospitals, as well as otherwise in medical practice, in which latter form it has been recommended by Professor Panum at a meeting of physicians at Copenhagen, and is now being employed in some of the hospitals of that city. Bones consist largely of animal matter and earthy substances which are invaluable in building up the frame of the body. In order to obtain all their goodness, we must crush them well before putting them into soups or stews. Beef. The flesh of the best quality of beef is of a bright red color, intersected with closely laid veins of yellowish fat. The kidney fat or suet is abundant, and there is a thick layer upon the back. The second quality has rather whitish fat, laid moderately thick upon the back, and about the kidneys. The flesh is close-grained, having but few streaks of fat running through it, and is of a pale red color and covered with a rough yellowish skin. Poor beef is dark red, gristly, and tough to the touch, with a scanty layer of soft, oily fat. Buy meat as cheap as you can, but be sure it is fresh. Slow and long cooking will make tough meat tender, but tainted meat is only fit to throw away. Never use it. You would, by doing so, invite disease to enter the home where smiling health should reign. The best way to detect taint in any kind of meat is to run a sharp, thin-bladed knife close to the bone, and then smell it to see if the odor is sweet. Wipe the knife after you use it. A small, sharp wooden skewer will answer, but it must be scraped every time it is used, or the meat juice remaining on it will become tainted, and it will be unfit for future use. If, when you are doubtful about a piece of meat, the butcher refuses to let you apply this test carefully enough to avoid injuring the meat, you will be safe in thinking he is afraid of the result. Mutton. Prime mutton is bright red, with plenty of hard white fat. The flesh of the second quality is dark red and close-grained, with very few threads of fat running through it. The fat is rather soft and is laid thin on the back and kidneys, closely adhering to them. The poorest healthy quality has very pale flesh and thin white fat, and the meat parts easily from the bone. Diseased mutton has decidedly yellow fat and very soft flesh of loose texture. Tainted mutton smells bad. Test it as you would beef. Lamb. A carcass of lamb should weigh about 25 pounds before it is old enough to be wholesome and nourishing food. Before it has reached that age, it is watery and deficient in the elements of strength. At any age, it is more suitable food for women and children than for healthy men. The finest kind has delicate rosy meat and white, almost transparent fat. The flesh of the second quality is soft and rather red compared with the pinkish white meat of choice kinds. The fat is more scanty and the general appearance coarser. The poorest lamb has yellow fat and lean, flabby red meat, which keeps but a short time. Test the freshness of lamb by touching the kidney fat. If it is soft and moist, the meat is on the verge of spoiling. A bad smell indicates that it is already tainted. It is utterly unfit for use. Veal. Prime veal is light flesh color and has abundance of hard, white, semi-transparent fat. The flesh of the second quality is red, in contrast to the pinkish white color of the prime sort, and the fat is whiter, coarser grained, and less abundant. The poorest kind has decidedly red flesh and very little kidney fat. The neck is the first part that taints, and it can be easily tested. The loin is just spoiling when the kidney fat begins to grow soft and clammy. Read this sentence about bob veal carefully, and be sure to remember it. It is the flesh of calves killed when 2 or 3 weeks old, or that of deaconed calves, which are killed almost as soon as they are born for the value of their skins. This practice cannot be too harshly condemned as a criminal waste of food. For a stock raiser or farmer who knows his business can feed his calves until they reach a healthy maturity, without seriously interfering with his supply of milk. The flesh of bob veal is a soft, flabby, sticky substance of a ropey, gelatinous nature, and being the first flesh, unchanged by the health-giving action of air and food, it is devoid of the elements necessary to transform it into wholesome food. It should never be eaten. Pork. The best kind of pork is fresh and pinkish in color, and the fat is firm and white. The second quality has rather hard, red flesh and yellowish fat. The poorest kind has dark, coarse-grained meat, soft fat, and discolored kidneys. The flesh of stale pork is moist and clammy, and its smell betrays its condition. Measly pork has little kernels in the fat and is unhealthy and dangerous food. After testing, as you would beef, so as to see if it is fresh, and making sure that it is not measly, we have still to dread the presence of trichina, a dangerous parasite present in the flesh of some hogs. The surest preventative of danger from this cause is thorough cooking, which destroys any germs that may exist in the meat. Cook your pork until it is crisp and brown, by a good steady fire or in boiling water at least 20 minutes to each pound. Pork eaten in cold weather or moderately in summer, alternately with other meats, is a palatable and nutritious food. It has a hard fiber and needs to be thoroughly chewed in order to be perfectly digested. For that reason it should be sparingly used by the young and very old. The least fat is found in the leg, which contains an excess of flesh-forming elements and resembles lean beef in composition. The most fat is in the face and the belly. When cured as bacon, it readily takes on the antiseptic action of salt and smoke, and becomes a valuable adjunct to vegetable food, as well as a pleasant relish, and in this shape it is one of the most important articles in general use. Poultry. Both poultry and game are less nutritious than meat, but they are more digestible, and consequently are better food than meat for persons of weak digestive organs and sedentary habits. They are both excellent for persons who think or write much. Fresh poultry may be known by its full, bright eyes, pliable feet, and soft, moist skin. The best is plump, fat, and nearly white, and the grain of the flesh is fine. The feet and neck of a young fowl are large in proportion to its size, and the tip of the breastbone is soft and easily bent between the fingers. A young cock has soft, loose spurs, and a long, full, bright red comb. Old fowls have long, thin necks and feet, and the flesh on the legs and back has a purplish shade. Chickens and fowls are always in season. Turkeys are good when white and plump, have full breasts and smooth legs, generally black, with soft, loose spurs. Hen turkeys are smaller, fatter, and plumper, but of inferior flavor. Full-grown turkeys are the best for boiling, as they do not tear in dressing. Old turkeys have long hairs, and the flesh is purplish where it shows under the skin on the legs and back. About March they deteriorate in quality. Young ducks and geese are plump, with light, semi-transparent fat, soft breastbone, tender flesh, leg joints which will break by the weight of the bird, fresh-colored and brittle beaks, and windpipes that break when pressed between the thumb and forefinger. They are best in fall and winter. Young pigeons have light red flesh upon the breast and full, fresh-colored legs. When the legs are thin and the breast is very dark, the birds are old. Game birds. Fine game birds are always heavy for their size. The flesh of the breast is firm and plump, and the skin clear, and if a few feathers are plucked from the inside of the leg and around the vent, the flesh of freshly killed birds will be fat and fresh-colored. If it is dark and discolored, the game has been hung a long time. The wings of good ducks, geese, pheasants, and woodcock are tender to the touch. The tips of the long wing feathers of partridges are pointed in young birds and round in old ones. Quail, snipe, and small birds should have full, tender breasts. Fish. Fish is richer in flesh-forming elements than game, poultry, lamb, or veal, but it contains less fat and gelatin. It is easily digested and makes strong, muscular flesh, but does not greatly increase the quantity of fat in the body. The red-blooded and oily kinds, such as salmon, sturgeon, eels, and herring, are much more nutritious than the white-blooded varieties, such as cod, haddock, and flounders. The salting of rich, oily fish like herring, mackerel, salmon, and sturgeon does not deprive it of its nutritive elements to the extent that is noticeable with cod. Salt codfish is almost entirely devoid of nutriment, while the first named oily varieties are valuable adjuncts to a vegetable diet. Although fish contains more water and less solid nutriment than meat, it is generally useful from its abundance and cheapness, and certain kinds which are called red-blooded are nearly as nourishing as meat. Oily fish satisfies hunger as completely as meat. Herring especially makes the people who eat it largely strong and sinewy. Sea fish are more nourishing than freshwater varieties. Sea fish and those which live in both salt and fresh water, such as salmon, shad, and smelts, are the finest flavored. The muddy taste of some freshwater species can be overcome by soaking them in cold water and salt for 2 hours or more before cooking. All kinds are best just before spawning, the flesh becoming poor and watery after that period. Fresh fish have firm flesh, rigid fins, bright, clear eyes, and ruddy gills. Oysters, clams, scallops, and mussels should be eaten very fresh, as they soon lose their flavor after being removed from the shell. Lobsters and crabs should be chosen by their brightness of color, lively movement, and great weight in proportion to their size. You ought always to buy them alive and put them head first into a large pot of boiling water containing a handful of salt. They will cook in about 20 minutes. Vegetables. In order to be healthy, we must eat some fresh vegetables. They are cheap and nourishing, especially onions and cabbages. Peas, beans, and lentils, all of which are among the lowest priced of foods, are invaluable in the diet of a laboring man. He can get so much nourishment out of them that he hardly needs meat, and if they are cooked in the water that has been used for boiling meat, they make the healthiest kind of a meal. All juicy vegetables should be very fresh and crisp, and if a little wilted, can be restored by being sprinkled with water and laid in a cool, dark place. All roots and tubers should be pared and laid in cold water an hour or more before using. Green vegetables are best just before they flower, and roots and tubers are prime from their ripening until they begin to sprout. When it is possible, buy your vegetables by the quantity from the farmers or market gardeners or at the market. You will save more than half. Potatoes now cost at Washington Market from $1 to $1.50 a barrel. There are 3 bushels in a barrel and 32 quarts in a bushel. Now at the groceries you pay 15 cents a half a peck, or 4 cents a quart. That makes your barrel of potatoes cost you $3.63 if you buy half a peck at a time, or $3.84 if you buy by the quart. So you see, if you could buy a barrel at once, you could save more than half of your money. It is worthwhile to try and save enough to do it. Fruit. Fresh fruit is a very important food, especially for children, as it keeps the blood pure and the bowels regular. Next to grains and seeds, it contains the greatest amount of nutriment to a given quantity. Apples are more wholesome than any other fruit, and plentiful and cheap 2/3 of the time. They nourish, cool, and strengthen the body. In Europe, laborers depend largely upon them for nourishment, and if they have plenty, they can do well without meat. They miss apples much more than potatoes, for they are much more substantial food. All fruit should be bought ripe and sound. It is poor economy to buy imperfect or decayed kinds, as they are neither satisfactory nor healthy eating, while the mature, full-flavored sorts are invaluable as food. Preserved and dried fruits are luxuries, to be indulged in only at festivals or holidays. Nuts are full of nutritious oil, but are generally hard to digest. They do not come under the head of the necessaries of life. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Colleen McMahon.
Chapter 2 of 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 2. How to Cook, Season, and Measure. Before beginning to give you receipts, I wish to tell you about the effect of cooking food in different ways. We all want it cooked, so that we can eat it easily and get the most strength from it, without wasting any part of it. I will tell you some very good reasons for making soup and stew out of your meat instead of cooking it in any other way. Roasting or baking. The first is the most extravagant way of cooking meat, as it wastes nearly 1/3 of its substance in drippings and steam. The second also is very wasteful, unless the meat is surrounded with vegetables or covered with a flour paste. When you do bake meat without a covering of paste, put it into a hot oven at the start, to crisp the outside and to keep in the valuable juices. You can moderate the heat of the oven as soon as the meat is brown, and let it finish cooking slowly by the heat of the steam which is constantly forming inside of it. It generally takes 20 minutes to bake each pound of meat. Broiling. This is another extravagant way of cooking meat, for a great deal of the fat runs into the fire, and some nourishment escapes up the chimney with the steam. If you must broil meat, have your fire hot and clear, and your gridiron perfectly clean, and, unless it has a ledge to hold the drippings, tip it towards the back of the fire, so that the fat will burn there, and not blacken the meat as it would if the gridiron were laid flat, and the fat could burn under the meat. Never stick a fork into broiled meat to turn it, and do not cut it to see if it is done, for if you do either, you will let out the juice. Study the following table, and then remember how near the time given in it comes to cooking according to your taste. Fish will broil in from 5 to 10 minutes. Birds and poultry in from 3 to 15 minutes. Chops in from 10 to 15 minutes. And steak in from 10 to 20 minutes. Boiling and stewing. Boiling food slowly or stewing it gently saves all its goodness. After the pot once boils, you cannot make its contents cook any faster if you have fire enough under it to run a steam engine. So save your fuel and add it to the fire little by little, only enough at a time to keep the pot boiling. Remember, if you boil meat hard and fast, it will be tough and tasteless, and most of its goodness will go up the chimney or out of the window with the steam. Boil the meat gently and keep it covered close to save the steam. It will condense on the inside of the cover and fall back in drops of moisture upon the meat. The following table shows how much is wasted in the different ways of cooking we have just spoken of. 4 pounds of beef waste in boiling or stewing about 1 pound of substance, but you have it all in the broth if you have kept the pot covered tightly. In baking, 1 pound and a quarter is almost entirely lost, unless you have plenty of vegetables in the dripping pan to absorb and preserve it. In roasting, before the fire, you lose nearly 1 pound and a half. Do not think you save the waste in the shape of drippings. It is poor economy to buy fat at the price of meat merely for the pleasure of trying it out. Frying. This is a very good method of cooking fish and of warming cold meat and vegetables. To fry well, put into your frying pan enough fat to cover what you mean to fry, and let it get smoking hot, but do not burn it. Then put in your food, and it will not soak fat, and will generally be done by the time it is nicely browned. To saute or half fry any article, you should begin by putting in the pan enough fat to cover the bottom, and let it get smoking hot, but not burnt, before you put in the food. This also is a good way to warm over meat, vegetables, oatmeal, or pudding. A very good way to cook meat and vegetables together is to put them in an earthen jar, cover it tightly, and cement the cover on with flour paste. Then bake for about 4 hours. If you are going to use a piece of meat cold, do not cut it until it cools, and it will be more juicy. If the meat is salt, let it cool on its own pot liquor for the same reason. Salt and smoked meats. These meats are best when they are put over the fire in cold water, brought gradually to a boil, and then set back from the fierce heat of the fire, so as to keep scalding hot without boiling. They take longer to cook this way, but they are tender and delicious, and very little fat is wasted. Seasoning food. Many people have the idea that a finely flavored dish must cost a great deal. That is a mistake. If you have untainted meat or sound vegetables, or even Indian meal to begin with, you can make it delicious with proper seasoning. One reason why French cooking is so much nicer than any other is that it is seasoned with a great variety of herbs and spices. These cost very little. If you would buy a few cents worth at a time, you would soon have a good assortment. The best kinds are sage, thyme, sweet marjoram, tarragon, mint, sweet basil, parsley, bay leaves, cloves, mace, celery seed, and onions. If you will plant the seed of any of the 7 first mentioned in little boxes on your windowsill or in a sunny spot in the yard, you can generally raise all you need. Gather and dry them as follows. Parsley and tarragon should be dried in June and July, just before flowering. Mint in June and July. Thyme, marjoram, and savory in July and August. Basil and sage in August and September. All herbs should be gathered in the sunshine and dried by artificial heat. Their flavor is best preserved by keeping them in airtight tin cans or in tightly corked glass bottles. Dried celery and parsley. If you ever use celery, wash the leaves, stalks, roots, and trimmings, and put them in a cool oven to dry thoroughly. Then grate the root and rub the leaves and stalks through a sieve, and put all into a tightly corked bottle or tin can with closed cover. This makes a most delicious seasoning for soups, stews, and stuffing. When you use parsley, save every bit of leaf, stalk, or root you do not need, and treat them in the same way as the celery. Remember, in using parsley, that the root has even a stronger flavor than the leaves, and do not waste a bit. Dried herbs. When you buy a bunch of dried herbs, rub the leaves through a sieve, and bottle them tightly until you need them. Tie the stalks together and save them until you want to make what the French call a bouquet for a soup or stew. A bouquet of herbs is made by tying together a few sprigs of parsley, thyme, and 2 bay leaves. The bay leaves, which have the flavor of laurel, can be bought at any German grocery or drugstore, enough to last for a long time, for 5 cents. Table sauce. There's no reason why you should not sometimes have a nice relish for cold meat when you can make a pint of it for 6 cents. So I will give you a receipt for it. Get at Washington Market at the herb stand a bunch of tarragon. It will cost 5 cents in the summer when it is green and strong, and not much more in the winter. Put it in an earthen bowl and pour on it 1 pint of scalding hot vinegar. Cover it and let it stand until the next day. Then strain it and put it into a bottle which you must cork tight. Either put more hot vinegar on the tarragon or dry it, and save it until you want to make more. You can make a gallon of sauce from 1 bunch. Only every time you use it, you must let it stand a day longer. Celery salt. If you mix celery root, which has been dried and grated as above, with 1/4 its quantity of salt, it makes a nice seasoning and keeps a long time. Spice salt. You can make this very nicely by drying, powdering, and mixing by repeated siftings the following ingredients: 1/4 of an ounce each of powdered thyme, bay leaf, and pepper. 1/8 of an ounce each of marjoram and cayenne pepper. 1/2 of an ounce each of powdered clove and nutmeg. To every 4 ounces of this powder, add 1 ounce of salt, and keep the mixture in an airtight vessel. 1 ounce of it added to 3 pounds of stuffing or forcemeat of any kind makes a delicious seasoning. Lemon and orange tincture. Never throw away lemon or orange peel. Cut the yellow outside off carefully and put it into a tightly corked bottle, with enough alcohol to cover it. Let it stand until the alcohol is a bright yellow. Then pour it off, bottle it tight, and use it for flavoring when you make rice pudding. Add lemon and alcohol as often as you have it, and you will always have a nice flavoring. Vanilla tincture. Make this from a broken vanilla bean, just as you would make lemon tincture. When you make a plain rice pudding, and when you boil rice with sweetening, put a teaspoonful of either of these tinctures with it, and it will be very good. Measuring. Be careful about measuring. Do not think you can guess just right every time. You cannot do it. One day the dinner will be a great deal better than another, and you will wonder why. It will be because it is carefully seasoned and properly cooked. A good rule for seasoning soups and stews is 1/2 ounce or a level tablespoonful of salt, and 1/2 level teaspoonful of pepper to each quart of water. Try it. If it is right, you will know how much to use. If it is not right, alter it to suit your taste. But settle the point for once, and then you will know what to depend upon. The following table will give you some good hints about measuring. There are 4 teaspoonfuls in 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoonfuls in 1 ounce, 2 ounces in 1 wineglassful, 2 wineglassfuls in 1 gill, 2 gills in 1 good-sized cupful, 2 cupfuls in 1 pint, 2 pints in 1 quart. 1 quart of sifted flour, thrown into the measure and shaken down but not pressed, weighs 1 pound. 1 quart of Indian cornmeal, shaken down in the measure, weighs 1 pound and 3 ounces. 1 quart of fine sugar weighs 1 pound and a half. End of chapter 2.
Chapter 3 of 25-cent dinners for families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-cent dinners for families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 3. Beverages. In my little book on 15-cent dinners, I decidedly advocate the substitution of milk or milk and water as a drink at meal times for tea and coffee on the score of economy, because milk is a food while the 2 former drinks are chiefly stimulants. They are pleasant because they warm and exhilarate, but they are luxuries because they give no strength. Therefore their use is extravagant when we are pinched for healthy food. It is true that when we drink them we do not feel as hungry as we do without them. The sensation of hunger is nature's sure sign that the body needs a new supply of food because the last has been exhausted. The change of the nourishing qualities of food into strength is always going on as long as any remains in the system.
The use of tea, coffee, and alcohol hinders this change, and consequently we are less hungry when we use them than when we do without them. Tea and coffee are certainly important aids to the cheerfulness and comfort at home, and when the first stage of economy, where every penny must be counted, has passed, we do not know of any pleasanter accessory to a meal than a cup of good tea or coffee. Tea. The physiological action of very strong tea is marked. Moderately used, it excites the action of the skin, lungs, and nervous system, and soothes any undue action of the heart. Used to excess, it causes indigestion, nervousness, and wakefulness. No doubt its effects are greatly modified by climate, for the Russians drink enormous quantities of very strong fine tea. A recent war report gives the following account of its use in the army. The Russian soldiers are said to live and fight almost wholly upon tea. The Cossacks often carried about in the shape of bricks, or rather tiles, which, before hardening, are soaked in sheep's blood and boiled in milk, with the addition of flour, butter, and salt, so as to constitute a kind of soup. The passion of the Russian for this beverage is simply astonishing. In the depth of winter he will empty 20 cups in succession, at nearly boiling point, until he perspires at every pore, and then, in a state of excitement, rush out, roll in the snow, get up, and go on to the next similar place of entertainment. So with the army. With every group or circle of tents travels the invariable tea kettle, suspended from a tripod, and it would be in vain to think of computing how many times each soldier's pannikin is filled upon a halt. It is his first idea. Frequently he carries it cold in a copper case as a solace upon the march. Dr. Edward Smith sums up the physiological action of tea as follows. 1. A sense of wakefulness. 2. Clearness of mind and activity of thought and imagination. 3. Increased disposition to make muscular exertion. 4. Reaction with a sense of exhaustion in the morning following the preceding efforts and in proportion to them. Coffee. The action of coffee is so similar to that of tea that we need not consider it separately. It will be sufficient to remark that the chief points of difference are lessening the action of the skin, increasing the action of the heart, and, when used very strong, aiding digestion to some extent. Cocoa and chocolate. Both these articles are made from the kernels of a tropical fruit, about the size of a cucumber, the fleshy part of which is sometimes used to produce a vinous liqueur. They are produced from the seeds of the cocoa palm and from a kind of ground nut. These kernels consist of gum, starch, and vegetable oil, and are marketed as cocoa shells, which are the husks of the kernel, cocoa nibs, which consist of the crushed nuts, and ground cocoa, which is the kernels ground fine. Chocolate is the finely ground powder from the kernels, mixed to a stiff paste with sugar, and sometimes a little starch. It is very nutritious. When it is difficult to digest, remove from its solution the oily cake, which will collect upon the surface as it cools. It is so nutritious that a small cake of it, weighing about 2 ounces, will satisfy hunger. For that reason it is a good lunch for travelers. Both cocoa and chocolate are very nutritious and are free from the reactionary influences of tea and coffee. Let us count the cost of these beverages and see which is the best for us. 1 quart of weak tea can be made from 3 teaspoonfuls or half an ounce of tea, which cost at least 1 cent. We must have for general use a gill of milk at 1 cent and 4 teaspoonfuls or 1 ounce of sugar at 1 cent. Thus, if we use only the above quantities of milk and sugar, 1 quart of tea costs 3 cents. If we increase them, it will cost more. 1 quart of weak coffee can be made from 1 ounce or 2 tablespoonfuls of coffee at a cost of 2 cents. 2 tablespoonfuls or ounces of sugar, 2 cents, and a half a pint of milk, 2 cents. The total cost, 6 cents. 1 quart of cocoa can be made from 2 ounces or 8 tablespoonfuls of cocoa shells, which cost 2 cents, with half a pint of milk and an ounce of sugar at 4 cents more. We have a quart of good, nutritious drink at 6 cents. It is all the better if the shells are boiled gently 2 or 3 hours. Of course, the nibs, or crushed cocoa, and chocolate will both produce a correspondingly nutritious beverage. Beer. Very poor families sometimes spend every day for beer enough to buy them a good wholesome meal, because they think it makes them strong. Beer, like all other liquors, is of no value whatever in making strength. It only nerves you up to spend all you can muster under the excitement it causes, and then leaves you weaker than before. What you need when you crave liquor is a good warm meal. The best doctors say that a man cannot drink more than about 1.5 pints of beer a day without injuring his health, and that healthy people during youth and middle age do not need it at all. Let it and all other liquors alone entirely, and you will be better off in health and purse. Beer for nursing women. It is generally believed that women who drink malt liquor are able to nurse children to greater advantage than those who do not use it. The fact is that while the quantity of milk may be increased, its nourishing quality will be impaired. There may be more milk for the child, but it will be poor. The effect of all malt liquors is to promote the secretion of the fluids of the body, but not to enrich them. Do not drink beer for the sake of your child, but try milk, or milk and water instead, and see if after a fair trial you do not have plenty for the baby, and if it does not grow strong and fat. If milk does not agree with you, or you cannot afford it, use barley water. It will not only give you plenty of milk, but it will nourish you as well as the baby. You will get from it all the nourishment that you may fancy you get from malt liquor. With this advantage in the barley water, you will get all the nutriment of the grain unchanged, while in the form of beer, the fermentation has destroyed part of it. The following is a good receipt. Barley water. Thoroughly wash 2 ounces of pearl barley, which costs less than 2 cents, to remove any musty or bad flavor. Put it over the fire in 2 quarts of cold water and boil it until it is reduced to 1 quart. Then strain it, cool it, and drink it whenever you are thirsty. A little sugar can be used without hurting the baby. Milk. I've already said that milk is the most perfect food. We will now see what it is made of and how it nourishes the body, and then we can understand how necessary it is to have it pure. The elements of milk which strengthen the whole body are the solid parts that separate in the form of curd when it begins to turn sour. The whey contains the salts and phosphates which strengthen the brain, bones, and digestive organs. The cream is the part which makes us fat. When we remember that cheese is made from the curd of milk, we can see why it is so valuable as food, and why a meal of black or brown bread and cheese will satisfy a hungry man. Try to afford at least a quart of good milk every day. It can be bought in New York now for 7 or 8 cents a quart, and if the children have plenty of seconds bread or oatmeal porridge and a cup of milk at mealtimes, they will be strong and rosy. Skim milk, buttermilk, and whey are all excellent foods, and far better drinks than beer or whiskey. Make a plain pudding now and then with skim milk, adding an ounce of suet to restore its richness. If the milk is turned a little sour, add lime water to it, in the proportion of 4 tablespoonfuls of the lime water to a quart. If the lime water is added before the milk begins to turn, it will help keep it fresh. The following is a good receipt for making lime water. Lime water. Slack 4 ounces of quick lime with a little water and gradually add enough water to make a gallon in all. Let it stand 3 hours, then bottle it in glass stoppered bottles, putting a portion of the undissolved lime in each bottle. When you want to use some, pour off the clear fluid from the top. Children should never have tea, coffee, or liquor. All these drinks hurt them. Give them milk or milk and water or pure water if you cannot afford milk. But you had better scant their clothes than their supply of milk. If you have to limit the supply of food, deny them something else, but give them plenty of bread and scalded milk, and you can keep them healthy. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4 of 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 4. Bread, Macaroni, and Rice. Homemade bread is healthier, satisfies hunger better, and is cheaper than baker's bread. Make bread yourself if you possibly can. Use middlings if you can possibly get them. They contain the best elements of wheat. Household flour has similar qualities, but is sometimes made from inferior kinds of wheat. Both are darker and cheaper than fine white flour, and bread made from them takes longer to "rise" than that made from fine flour. Baker's bread is generally made from poor flour mixed with a little of the better sort, or with a little alum, which added to the wheat grown in wet season keeps the bread from being pasty and poor in taste. The prices of baker's bread upon the streets in the eastern and western parts of the city are as follows. Ordinary white bread, 5-cent loaf weighs 3/4 of a pound. 6-cent loaf weighs 14 ounces. 8-cent loaf weighs 1 pound and 10 ounces. Black bread, 2 8-cent loaves weigh, respectively, 1 pound 8 and 1 pound 10 ounces. Fine French bread, 8-cent loaf weighs 3/4 of a pound. In the French Quarter, a 6-cent loaf weighs 1 pound. We advise the purchase of new flour in preference to old, because, unless flour is cooled and dried before it is packed, the combined action of heat and dampness destroys its gluten and turns it sour. Gluten is the nutritive part of the flour, that which makes it absorb water and yield more bread. If you do not have a good oven, your bread can be baked at the baker's for about a cent a loaf. When bread is made too light, it is tasteless and lacks nourishment, because the decay caused in the elements of the flour used to make it by the great quantity of yeast employed destroys the most nutritious parts of it. A pint of milk in a batch of 4 loaves of bread gives you a pound more bread of better quality and helps to make it moist. Scalded skim milk will go as far as fresh whole milk, and you can use the cream for some other dish. 1 pound of pea meal or ground split peas added to every 14 pounds of flour used for bread increases its nourishment and helps to satisfy hunger. Keep your bread in a covered earthen jar when it is too stale to eat, or make it into bread broth. Dry it in a cool oven or over the top of the fire. Roll it with a rolling pin, sift it through a sieve, and save the finest crumbs to roll fish or chops in for frying, and the largest for puddings. If a whole loaf is stale, put it into a tight tin can and either steam it or put it into a moderately warm oven for half an hour. It will then be as good as fresh bread to the taste and a great deal more healthy. A good allowance of bread each day is as follows. For a man, 2 pounds, costing 6 cents. For boys and women, 1 pound and a half, costing 5 cents. For children, a pound each, costing 3 cents. Homemade bread. Put 7 pounds of flour into a deep pan and make a hollow in the center. Into this put 1 quart of lukewarm water, 1 tablespoonful of salt, 1 teaspoonful of sugar, and half a gill of yeast. Have ready 3 pints more of warm water and use as much of it as is necessary to make a rather soft dough, mixing and kneading it well with both hands. When it is smooth and shining, strew a little flour upon it. Lay a large towel over it folded, and set it in a warm place by the fire for 4 or 5 hours to rise. Then knead it again for 15 minutes, cover it with the towel, and set it to rise once more. Then divide it into 2 or 4 loaves and bake it in a quick oven. This quantity of flour will make 8 pounds of bread and will require 1 hour's baking to 2 pounds of dough. It will cost about 30 cents and will last about 2 days and a half for a family of 6. In cold weather, the dough should be mixed in a warm room and not allowed to cool while rising. If it does not rise well, set the pan containing it over a large vessel of boiling water. It is best to mix the bread at night and let it rise till morning in a warm and even temperature. Rice bread. Simmer 1 pound of rice in 3 quarts of water until the rice is soft and the water evaporated or absorbed. Let it cool until it is only lukewarm. Mix into it nearly 4 pounds of flour, 2 teaspoonfuls of salt, and 4 tablespoonfuls of yeast. Knead it until it is smooth and shining. Let it rise before the fire, make it up into loaves with a little flour reserved from the 4 pounds, and bake it thoroughly. It will cost about 25 cents and make more than 8 pounds of excellent bread. Potato bread. Take good, mealy boiled potatoes in the proportion of 1/3 of the quantity of flour you propose to use. Pass them through a coarse sieve into the flour, using a wooden spoon and adding enough cold water to enable you to pass them through readily. Use the proper quantity of yeast, salt, and water, and make up the bread in the usual way. It will cost about 24 cents if you use the above quantities, and give you 8 pounds or more of good bread. Pulled bread. Take from the oven an ordinary loaf of bread when it is about half baked, and with the fingers, while it is yet hot, pull it apart in egg-sized pieces of irregular shape. Throw them upon tins and bake them in a slow oven to a rich brown color. This bread is excellent to eat with cheese or wine. An ordinary sized loaf costing about 3 cents makes a large panful. Bread made with baking powder. Where bread is made with baking powder, the following rule should be closely observed. If any shortening be used, it should be rubbed into the flour before it is wet. Cold water or sweet milk should always be used to wet it, and the dough should be kneaded immediately, and only long enough to thoroughly mix it and form it in the desired shape. It should then be placed in a well-heated oven and baked quickly. Otherwise, the carbonic acid gas will escape before the expanded cells are fixed in the bread, and thus the lightness of the loaf will be impaired. Breakfast rolls. Mix well by sifting together 1/2 pound of flour. Cost 2 cents. A heaping teaspoonful of baking powder, a level teaspoonful of salt, and a heaping teaspoonful of sugar. Cost 1 cent. Rub into a little of the above 1 ounce of lard. Cost 1 cent. Mix it with the rest of the flour and quickly wet it up with enough cold milk to enable you to roll it out about 1/2 inch thick. Cost 2 cents. Cut out the dough with a tin shape or with a sharp knife in the form of diamonds. Lightly wet the top with water and double them half over. Put them upon a tin, buttered and warmed, and bake them in a hot oven. This receipt will cost about 6 cents and will make about 9 good-sized rolls. Tea biscuit. Mix as above, using the same proportions, and cutting out with a biscuit cutter. When they are baked, wash them over with cold milk and return them to the oven for a moment to dry. The cost is the same. Macaroni. This is a paste made from the purest wheat flour and water. It is generally known as a rather luxurious dish among the wealthy, but it should become one of the chief foods of the people, for it contains more gluten, or the nutritious portion of wheat, than bread. It is one of the most wholesome and economical of foods, and can be varied so as to give a succession of palatable dishes at a very small cost. The imported macaroni can be bought at Italian stores for about 15 cents a pound, and that quantity when boiled yields nearly 4 times its bulk, if it has been manufactured for any length of time. Good macaroni is yellow or brownish in color. White sorts are always poor. It should never be soaked or washed before boiling or put into cold or lukewarm water. Wipe it carefully, break it in whatever lengths you want it, and put it into boiling water, to every quart of which 1/2 tablespoonful of salt is added. You can boil an onion with it if you like the flavor. As soon as it is tender enough to yield easily when pressed between the fingers, drain it in a colander, saving its liquor for the next day's broth, and lay it in cold water until you want to use it. When more macaroni has been boiled than is used, it can be kept perfectly good by laying it in fresh water, which must be changed every day. After boiling the macaroni as above, you can use it according to any of the following directions. 1/2 pound of uncooked macaroni will make a large dishful. Macaroni farmer style. Boil 1/2 pound of macaroni as above, and while you are draining it from the cold water, stir together over the fire 1 ounce each of butter and flour, and as soon as they bubble, gradually pour into the sauce they make a pint of boiling water, beating it with a fork or egg whip until it is smooth. Season it with a level teaspoonful of salt and a level saltspoonful of pepper, and put the macaroni in it to heat. Then cut an onion in small shreds and brown it over the fire in a very little fat. When both are done, dish the macaroni and pour the onion out of the frying pan upon it. It is excellent, and 10 cents will cover the cost of all of it. Macaroni with broth. Put half a pound of macaroni, boiled as above and washed in cold water, over the fire with any kind of broth, or 1 pint of cold gravy and water. Season it to taste with pepper and salt, and let it heat slowly for an hour, or less if you are in a hurry. Then lay it on a flat dish, strew over it a few breadcrumbs, which you will almost always have on hand if you save all the bits I speak of in the article on bread. Then set the dish in the oven or in front of the fire to brown. It will cost less than 10 cents and be delicious and very hearty. Macaroni with white sauce. Warm half a pound of macaroni, boiled and washed in cold water, as above, in the following sauce, and use it as soon as it is hot. Stir together over the fire 1 ounce each of butter and flour, pouring in 1 pint of boiling water and milk. As soon as the butter and flour are mixed, season it with the salt and pepper to taste and put the macaroni into it. This dish costs less than 10 cents and is very good and wholesome. Macaroni with cheese. Boil half a pound of macaroni as above, put into a pudding dish in layers with 1/4 pound of cheese, cost 4 cents. Grated and mixed between the layers. Season it with pepper and salt to taste. Put a very little butter and some breadcrumbs over it and brown it in the oven. It will make just as hearty and strengthening a meal as meat and will cost about 12 cents. Macaroni Milanese style. Have ready some sauce made according to the receipt for tomato sauce given below, or use some fresh tomatoes passed through a sieve with a wooden spoon and highly seasoned, and 2 ounces of grated cheese. Put half a pound of imported Italian macaroni, cost 8 cents, in 3 quarts of boiling water, with 2 tablespoonfuls of salt, 1 saltspoonful of pepper, and a teaspoonful of butter, cost 1 cent. Boil rapidly for about 20 minutes, then drain it in a colander. Run plenty of cold water from the faucet through it, and lay it in a pan of cold water until you are ready to use it. Put into a saucepan 1 gill of tomato sauce, cost 2 cents, 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents, and 1 gill of any meat gravy free from fat, and stir until they are smoothly blended. Put a 1/2-inch layer of macaroni on the bottom of a dish, moisten it with 4 tablespoonfuls of the sauce, sprinkle over it 1/2 ounce of the grated cheese, make 3 other layers like this, using all the macaroni, cheese, and sauce, and brown the macaroni in a hot oven for about 5 minutes. Serve it hot. It will cost about 13 cents. Macaroni with tomato sauce. Boil half a pound of macaroni as already directed, and lay it in cold water. Make a tomato sauce as follows, and dress the macaroni with it, using only enough to moisten it, and sprinkling the top with 1 ounce of grated cheese. Cost 1 cent. Serve it hot. Tomato sauce. Boil together for 1 hour 1/4 can of tomatoes, or 6 large fresh ones. Cost 5 cents. 1 gill of broth of any kind, 1 sprig of thyme, 1 sprig of parsley, 3 whole cloves, 3 peppercorns, and 1/2 ounce of onion sliced. Cost 2 cents. Rub them through a sieve with a wooden spoon and set the sauce to keep hot. Mix together over the fire 1 ounce of butter and 1/2 ounce of flour. Cost 2 cents. And when smooth, incorporate with the tomato sauce. The cost of the tomato sauce will be about 10 cents, and of the entire dish about 18 cents. If you do not wish to use all the tomato sauce, and you do not need to, save it to use with fried chops of any kind. Rice. Rice is largely composed of starch, and for that reason is less nutritious than flour, oatmeal, Indian meal, or macaroni, but it is a wholesome and economical food when used with a little meat broth, drippings, or molasses. It is a very safe food for children, especially if used with a little molasses. The following is an excellent supper dish. Rice panada. Boil half a pound of rice, which costs 5 cents, 1/4 pound of suet at 2 cents, with 1 tablespoonful of salt and 1 of sugar, cost 1 cent. Fast in boiling water for 15 minutes. Meantime, mix half a pound of flour, cost 2 cents, gradually with 1 quart of water and 1 gill of molasses, cost 2 cents. Stir this into the boiling rice and boil it for about 5 minutes. This makes a nice supper of over 5 pounds of good, nutritious food for 12 cents. Boiled rice. Another good dish of rice for supper can be made as follows. Wash half a pound of rice, cost 5 cents. Throw it into 1 quart of boiling water containing 2 teaspoonfuls of salt and boil it fast 10 minutes. Drain it in a colander, saving the water to use with broth next day. Meantime, just grease the pot with sweet drippings. Put the rice back in it, cover it, and set it on a brick on the top of the stove or in a cool oven, and let it stand 10 minutes to swell. Be careful not to burn it. The addition of a very little butter, sugar, molasses, nutmeg, lemon juice, or salt and pepper will give it different flavors, so that you can vary the taste and have it often without getting tired of it, and it need never cost you over 7 cents. Rice, Milanese style. Fry 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents, light brown. Put into it half a pound of rice, cost 5 cents, well picked over but not washed, and 1 ounce of onion chopped fine. Stir and brown for about 5 minutes, then add a pint of gravy from meat, season with a level teaspoonful of salt, quarter that quantity of pepper, and as much cayenne as you can take on the point of a very small penknife blade. The onion and seasoning will cost less than 2 cents. Stew gently for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally to prevent burning, and serve as soon as the rice is tender. This makes a palatable dish for about 10 cents. Rice, Japanese style. Put half a pound of well-washed rice into a double kettle with 1 pint of milk or water, 1 heaping teaspoonful of salt, and quarter of a medium-sized nutmeg grated. Boil it until tender, about 40 minutes. If it seems very dry, add a little more liquid, taking care not to have it sloppy when it is cooked. When milk is used, it may be served with milk and sugar as a breakfast or tea dish. When water takes the place of milk, the addition of 1 ounce of butter and half a saltspoonful of pepper makes a nice dinner dish of it. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5 of 25-cent dinners for families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-cent dinners for families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Soup. The value of soup as food cannot be overestimated. In times of scarcity and distress, when the question has arisen of how to feed the largest number of persons upon the least quantity of food, the aliment chosen has always been soup. There are 2 reasons for this. First, by the addition of water to the ingredients used, we secure the aid of this important agent distributing nutrition equally throughout the blood to await final absorption. And second, we gain that sense of repletion so necessary to the satisfaction of hunger. The fact being acknowledged that the sensation we call hunger is often allayed by the presence of even innutritious substances in the stomach. Good soup is literally the juice of any ingredient from which it is made, the extract of the meat, grains, or vegetables composing it. The most economical of soups eaten with bread will satisfy the hunger of the hardest worker. The absolute nutritive value of soup depends, of course, upon its ingredients, and these can easily be chosen in reference to the maintenance of health. For instance, the pot liquor in which meat has been boiled needs only the addition of a few dumplings or cereals and seasoning to form a perfect nutriment. That produced from skin and bones can be made equally palatable and nutritious by boiling with it a few vegetables and sweet herbs, and some rice, barley, or oatmeal. Even the gelatinous residue produced by long continued boiling, without the presence of any foreign matter, is a useful emollient application to the inflamed mucous surfaces in some diseases, while it affords at the same time the degree of distension necessary to prevent flatulency. The time required to make the most palatable and nutritious soup is short. Lean meat should be chopped fine, placed in cold water in the proportion of a pint to each pound, slowly heated and thoroughly skimmed. 5 minutes boiling will extract from the meat every particle of its nutriment and flavor. The liquor can then be strained off, seasoned, and eaten with bread, biscuit, or vegetables. Peas or beans boiled and added to the soup make it the most perfect food for sustaining health and strength. It is the pure juice of the meat and contains all its savory and life-giving principles. If your family is large, it will be well for you to keep a clean saucepan or pot on the back of the stove to receive all the clean scraps of meat, bones, and remains of poultry and game, which are found in every kitchen, but vegetables should not be put into it, as they are apt to sour. The proper proportions for soup are 1 pound of meat and bone to 1½ quarts of cold water. The meat and bones to be well chopped and broken up and put over the fire in cold water, being brought slowly to a boil and carefully skimmed as often as any scum rises, and being maintained at a steady boiling point from 2 to 6 hours, as time permits. 1 hour before the stock is done, add to it 1 carrot and 1 turnip pared, 1 onion stuck with 3 cloves, and a bouquet of sweet herbs. When soup is to be boiled 6 hours, you must allow 2 quarts of water to every pound of meat, and you must see that the pot boils slowly and regularly and is well skimmed. When you want to keep soup from one meal to another, or overnight, you must pour it into an earthen pot or bowl, because it will turn by being allowed to remain in the metal pot. I shall give you first some receipts for making soups without meat, and then some of the cheapest meat soups I have tried. The first is very cheap and nutritious, and should be served at meals where no meat is to be used. Bread and a cheap pudding will be sufficient to use with it. Scotch broth without meat. Steep 4 ounces of pearl barley, cost 3 cents, overnight in cold water, and wash it well in fresh water. Cut in dice 1/2 inch square 6 ounces of yellow turnip, 6 ounces of carrot, 4 ounces of onion, 2 ounces of celery, or use in its place 1/4 of a saltspoonful of celery seed. Cost of all about 1 cent. Put all these into 2½ quarts of boiling water. Season with a teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 of a saltspoonful of pepper, and as much cayenne as you can take up on the point of a very small penknife blade. Cost 1 cent. Boil slowly for 2 hours, then stir in 1/4 pound of oatmeal. Cost 2 cents. Mix to a smooth batter with cold water. See if seasoning be correct. Add 2 or 3 grates of nutmeg and boil half an hour. Meantime, cut 2 slices of bread, cost 1 cent, in 1/2 inch dice. Fry light brown in hot fat, cost 2 cents, and lay the bits in the soup tureen. When the soup is ready, pour it over them and serve. This soup, which costs only about 10 cents, is palatable as well as economical. Pea soup. Use 1/2 pint or 7 ounces of dried peas, cost 3 cents, for every 2 quarts of soup you want. Put them in 3 quarts of cold water after washing them well. Bring them slowly to a boil, add a bone or bit of ham, if you have it to spare, 1 turnip and 1 carrot peeled, 1 onion stuck with 3 cloves, cost 3 cents, and simmer 3 hours, stirring occasionally to prevent burning. Then pass the soup through a sieve with the aid of a potato masher, and if it shows any sign of settling, stir into it 1 tablespoonful each of butter and flour mixed together dry. Cost 2 cents. This will prevent settling. Meantime, fry some dice of stale bread, about 2 slices, cut 1/2 inch square in hot fat, drain them on a sieve, and put them in the bottom of the soup tureen in which the pea soup is served, or cut some bits of very hard stale bread or dry toast to use instead of the fried bread. By the time the soup is done, it will have boiled down to 2 quarts and will be very thick and good. This receipt will cost you about 10 cents. Thick pea soup. Fry 1 sliced onion, cost 1/2 cent, in 1 ounce of suet or drippings, cost 1/2 cent, using an iron pot to fry it in. As soon as it is brown, put into the same pot 3 quarts of cold water, 1 pint, or 14 ounces of well-washed peas, cost 5 cents, and boil as above. This quantity of peas does not need any crusts in the soup. It will be thick enough, but bread may be eaten with it if you want it. This soup costs 6 cents. Bean soup. For this, use the receipt for pea soup, using beans instead of peas. The cost will be about the same. Lentil soup. For 2 quarts of soup, 1/2 pint of yellow lentils, cost 5 cents. washed and put to boil in 3 pints of cold water with 1 cent's worth of soup greens, and boil gently until the lentils are soft enough to break between the fingers. Every half hour a gill of cold water should be added, and the lentils again raised to a boiling point until they are done. They should then be passed through a sieve with a wooden spoon, using enough of the liquor to make them pass easy, and mixed with the rest of the soup. It should be seasoned with salt and pepper, and is then ready to simmer for half an hour, and serve hot, with dice of fried bread half an inch square, like those used for pea soup, or with bits of stale bread. A plentiful dinner of lentil soup and bread costs only about 10 cents. Onion soup. Chop half a quart of onions, cost 3 cents. Fry them brown in a large saucepan with 2 ounces of drippings, stirring until they are well browned but not burned. Then stir in half a pound or a little less of oatmeal, cost 3 cents. Add 3 quarts of water and season to taste with pepper and salt. The drippings and seasoning cost 1 cent. While the soup is boiling, which must be for about 20 minutes, with occasional stirring, toast a third of a 6-cent loaf of bread, cut it in half-inch bits, lay it in the soup tureen, and when the soup is ready, pour it on the toast. The soup will cost about 10 cents and is extremely nourishing. Spinach soup. Put 1 quart of spinach, cost 5 cents, to boil in a large pot full of boiling water, well salted with 2 tablespoonfuls of salt. Cover until it boils up once, then remove the cover and with a wooden spoon press the spinach under water as fast as it rises to the surface. Boil it steadily only until it is tender, then drain it, run plenty of cold water from the faucet over it while it is still in the colander. Drain it again, chop it fine, and pass it through a kitchen sieve with the aid of a wooden spoon. Boil 1 quart of milk, cost 8 cents, and 1 quart of water. Add the spinach to it, thicken it by stirring in 2 tablespoonfuls of cornstarch dissolved in cold milk. Season it with 1 teaspoonful of salt, quarter of a saltspoonful of white pepper, and the same of nutmeg. Cost of seasoning 1 cent, and serve it as soon as it boils up. It costs only 15 cents and is delicious. Soup can be made from any green vegetable or herb in the same way. Vegetable soup. The following is the receipt given by the celebrated Francatelli for a cheap vegetable soup. Put 6 quarts of water to boil in a large pot with quarter of a pound of suet, or 2 ounces of drippings, cost about 2 cents. Season it with a level tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, and a few sprigs of parsley and dried herbs. Cost of seasoning 1 cent. While it is boiling, prepare about 10 cents worth of cabbage, turnips, beans, or any cheap vegetables in season. Throw them into the boiling soup, and when they have boiled up thoroughly, set the pot at the side of the fire, where it will simmer for about 2 hours. Then take up some of the vegetables without breaking, and use them with any gravy you may have on hand, or with quarter of a pound of bacon, cost 4 cents, sliced and fried for the bulk of the meal. The soup, after being seasoned to taste, can be eaten with bread at the beginning of the meal, the whole of which can be provided for about 20 cents. Vegetable porridge. Pare and slice thin 10 cents worth of carrots, turnips, onions, and parsnips, and put them into 3 quarts of water, with a few sprigs of parsley and dried herbs. Season them with half a tablespoonful of salt and quarter of a teaspoonful of pepper, and let them boil till very soft, 2 hours or more. Then rub them all through a colander, return the porridge to the pot, and set it over the fire to heat, stirring it to prevent burning. Use it with bread. It will cost about 15 cents for enough for a hearty meal. Rice milk. Put half a pound of well-washed rice into 2 quarts of boiling water, with 2 ounces of sweet drippings, a teaspoonful of salt, and a bit of cinnamon or lemon peel, and let all boil gently about an hour. Then add 1 quart of milk and stir the rice for about 10 minutes. A little sugar or molasses may be added if you want it sweet. It makes an excellent breakfast or supper dish and costs about 15 cents. Fish soup. Make this soup from any rich, glutinous fish, such as cod's head, halibut neck, flounders, skate, or any cheap fish which is in season, and which you can buy for 5 or 6 cents a pound. Chop 1 or 2 onions, Fry them in a pot with 2 ounces of drippings till light brown. Season with a level tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, and a teaspoonful of sweet herbs of any kind. Then add 2 quarts of hot water and let all boil for 10 minutes. Meantime, mix 1/4 pound of oatmeal with 1 pint of cold water, and wash and cut in 2-inch pieces about 2 pounds of fish. When the soup has boiled 10 minutes, put the fish into it and carefully stir in the oatmeal. Let it boil 20 minutes, stirring occasionally to prevent burning. It will then be ready to use. The seasoning, drippings, and oatmeal will cost about 5 cents, and the fish 10 more. With the addition of bread and potatoes, say 5 cents worth of either, it makes an excellent meal, costing about 20 cents. Fish chowder. Fry together in the bottom of a saucepan 4 ounces of salt pork and 2 onions sliced. When brown, season with a teaspoonful of sweet herbs and a very little salt and pepper. Meantime, peel and slice half a dozen medium-sized potatoes and lay them in cold water, and cut in small slices 2 pounds of any fish, which costs about 5 cents per pound. When the onions and pork are brown, put the potatoes and fish upon them in layers, seasoning with a level tablespoonful of salt and half a teaspoonful of pepper. Pour over all cold water enough to cover the ingredients, and let them cook 20 minutes after they begin to boil. Soak half a pound of sea biscuit in cold water, and when the chowder is nearly done, lay them on it, and pour over them half a pint of milk. In 5 minutes the chowder will be ready to use. The onions, pork, and seasoning will cost 5 cents. The potatoes, crackers, and milk 5 more, and the fish 10 cents. Total for 2 quarts of good chowder, 20 cents. Mutton broth. Put 2 pounds of a jointed neck of mutton, cost 12 cents, in 2½ quarts of cold water, and let it boil slowly. Skim it carefully, season it with a level tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, and the same of sweet herbs. Then add 1 quart of yellow turnips, peeled and quartered, cost 3 cents, and 4 ounces of well-washed pearl barley, cost 2 cents, and boil about an hour longer, or until the turnips and barley are tender. Take up the meat on a platter, lay the turnips around it, and pour the broth and barley into a soup tureen. The broth, meat, and vegetables will cost 17 cents, and will make a good dinner with the addition of bread. Or you can use the mutton and turnips for one meal, and keep the broth and barley for another. Veal broth. Make this as you would the mutton broth, using a knuckle of veal, which costs 10 cents, instead of the neck of mutton, and 1/4 pound of rice, which costs 2 or 3 cents, instead of barley. Omit the turnips. You will have a good nutritious broth for about 13 cents. White broth. Cut 2 pounds of the neck of veal, cost 12 cents, in cutlets, and put it in a saucepan with 2 ounces of salt pork, cost 2 cents, a level tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, 1 onion chopped, 6 whole cloves, and half a pint of water. The seasoning will cost about 1 cent. Boil these ingredients for 10 minutes, stirring often enough to prevent burning. Then add 2½ quarts of hot water, and skim the broth thoroughly as soon as it boils up. Let it simmer for half an hour, when take up the meat, reserving it for stew, strain the broth, let it boil up again, and then put it into 1/4 pound of macaroni, cost 4 cents, and boil it for half an hour longer. While it is boiling, put the meat with half a quart of peeled and quartered potatoes, cost 2 cents, a teaspoonful of salt, and a pint of boiling water into a saucepan, and let them cook as long as the macaroni. Serve the stew by itself, and the broth and macaroni in a soup tureen. With bread, these 2 dishes make a good dinner, at a cost of about 25 cents. You can sometimes use rice or dumplings instead of macaroni. Cream soup. Proceed as for white broth, using the meat for a stew, skimming all the fat off the broth, and then adding to it 2 tablespoonfuls of flour mixed smooth with half a pint of milk. When the milk and flour are mixed smooth, pour into them a gill of the boiling broth, and then add them to the soup. See if the seasoning is right, and boil it 10 minutes, stirring it to prevent burning. During this time, toast a few slices of stale bread, cut them in dice, and put them in the soup tureen. When the soup is ready, Pour it over the toast, take up the stew on another dish, and serve both together. They make a good dinner for about 25 cents. Beef broth. Put 2 pounds of lean beef from the neck, cost 12 cents, in 2½ quarts of cold water to boil. Skim as soon as it boils and add a level tablespoonful of salt, half a teaspoonful of pepper, quarter of a nutmeg grated, a few sweet herbs, and half a dozen cloves. Cost of seasoning 2 cents. Boil gently for 1 hour. At the end of quarter of an hour, make as follows. Some Norfolk dumplings. Mix by sifting together 1 pound of flour, 1 teaspoonful of salt, and 2 of baking powder. Cost 3 cents. Make into a soft dough with 1 egg, half a pint of milk, and a very little water. Cost 4 cents. And drop them by the tablespoonful in the soup. Be careful that the pot does not stop boiling, or the dumplings will be heavy. At the end of 3/4 of an hour, stir together over the fire in a large saucepan 1 ounce each of butter and flour. Cost 2 cents. And when they are nicely browned, gradually add and mix with an egg whip or large fork a pint of the boiling soup. Take up the meat and dumplings on the same dish, strain the soup into the sauce you have just made, and mix it thoroughly. Put a little of it over the meat and dumplings, and serve the rest in the soup tureen. It is very nice with small dice of toast in it. Both dishes make an excellent dinner at a cost of about 25 cents, including bread. Meat brewis. This palatable dish is made by putting the thick upper or under crust of a stale loaf of bread into the pot when any meat or soup is boiling, and letting it remain about 5 minutes to thoroughly absorb the broth. It should then be taken out as whole as possible and eaten at once. It is satisfactory, nutritious, and economical, enough for a hearty meal costing not more than 5 cents. End of chapter 5.
Chapter 6 of 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nan Dodge. 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 6. Peas, Beans, Lentils, and Maize. Before giving you receipts for cooking peas, beans, and lentils, I want to show you how important they are as foods. I have already spoken of the heat and flesh-forming properties of food as the test of its usefulness. Try to understand that a laboring man needs 12 ounces and a half of heat food and half an ounce of flesh food every day to keep him healthy. 1 pound, or 1 1/4 pints of dried peas, beans, or lentils contains nearly 6 ounces of heat food and half an ounce of flesh food. That is nearly as much heat food and more than twice as much flesh food as wheat. A little fat, salt meat, or suet cooked with them to bring up their amount of heat food to the right point makes either of them the best and most strengthening food a working man can have. The only objection to their frequent use is the fact that their skins are sometimes hard to digest. But if you make them into soup or pudding, rubbing them through a sieve after they are partly cooked, you will be safe from any danger. Oatmeal and peas. Cut 1/4 pound of fat pork or bacon, cost 4 cents, into pieces 1/2 inch square. Put it in the bottom of a pot with 2 sliced onions, cost 1 cent, and fry 10 minutes without burning. Season with 2 teaspoonfuls of salt, 1 of sugar, and 1 saltspoonful of pepper. Cost of seasoning 1 cent. Then add 3 quarts of cold water and 1 pint of peas. Cost 5 cents, and boil the whole gently until the peas become quite soft. Then stir in enough oatmeal to thicken, about 1/4 pound, cost 2 cents or less. Simmer for 20 minutes and then eat hot. It is the healthiest kind of a meal and costs 13 cents or less. Peas pudding. Soak 1 pint of dried peas, cost 5 cents, in cold water overnight. Tie them loosely in a clean cloth and boil them about 2 hours in pot liquor or water, putting them into it cold and bringing them gradually to a boil. Drain them, pass them through a sieve with a wooden spoon. Season them with a level tablespoonful of salt, half a saltspoonful of pepper, 1 ounce of butter, and 1 egg, all of which will cost 5 cents. Mix, tie in a clean cloth, and boil half an hour longer. Then turn it from the cloth on a dish and serve hot. This receipt makes a good large pudding for 10 cents, or you can leave out the egg and it will cost less. Peas and bacon. Put 1 pound of bacon, cost 12 cents, to boil in 2½ quarts of cold water. With 1 pint of dried peas, cost 5 cents. When the peas are soft, drain them, press them through a sieve, lay them neatly on a flat dish, place the bacon on them, and set them in the oven to brown. Meantime, strain any water which may remain after boiling them, and thicken it over the fire with Indian meal, in the proportion of 4 or 5 tablespoonfuls to each pint, so as to make it thick enough to cut and fry when cold. Boil it about 1 hour, and then cool it. As soon as the peas and bacon are brown, serve them with boiled potatoes or bread, about 5 cents worth of either. They make a good dinner, and with the hasty pudding, cost only about 25 cents. Baked peas. Proceed as directed for peas pudding, only instead of putting the peas again in the cloth, put them in a pudding dish, and brown them in the oven. A large dish costs only 10 cents. Peas and onions. Proceed as directed for peas pudding, omitting the egg, and substituting for it an onion chopped and fried in 1 ounce of drippings. Bake as in the previous receipt. The cost will be about 10 cents, and the dish is exceedingly nutritious. Baked beans. Put 1 pint of dried beans, cost 6 cents, and 1/4 pound of salt pork, cost 4 cents, into 2 quarts of cold water. Bring them to a boil, and boil them slowly for about 20 minutes. Then put the beans, with about a teacupful of the water they were boiled in, into an open jar. Season them with salt and pepper to taste, and 1 tablespoonful of molasses. Cost of seasoning 1 cent. Lay the pork on the top and bake 2 hours or longer. The dish will cost about 10 cents, and is palatable and nutritious. The liquor in which the beans were boiled should be saved, and used the next morning as broth, with seasoning and a little fried or toasted bread in it. Stewed beans. Soak a pint of dried beans, cost 6 cents, overnight in cold water. Put them to boil in 1 quart of cold water with 1 ounce of drippings, a level tablespoonful of salt, and 1/4 teaspoonful of pepper, and boil them gently for 2 hours. Then drain them, put them into a saucepan with 1 ounce of butter and a tablespoonful of chopped parsley, and after heating them through, serve them at once. The drippings, butter, and seasoning will not cost more than 4 cents, and the whole dish can be made for 10. Fried beans. Proceed as above, omitting the parsley, and let the butter get hot in a frying pan before putting the beans in. Fry them a little, stirring them so that they will brown equally, and then serve them. The dish will cost 10 cents. Beans and bacon. Soak a pint of dried beans, cost 6 cents, overnight in cold water. Put them over the fire in 1 quart of cold water with 1/4 pound of bacon, cost 3 cents, and boil them gently for about 2 hours. Then stir in 2 tablespoonfuls of flour Mix smooth with a little cold water. Season to taste with pepper, salt, and if you like it, a little chopped onion, and let them stew gently for about 10 minutes. They will then be ready to serve. The dish will cost 10 cents. Lentils. Lentils have been used for food in older countries for a long time, and it is quite necessary that we should become acquainted with their merits if we want to save. I give a lentil soup and some excellent directions for cooking this invaluable food. 1 quart of lentils, when cooked, will make 4 pounds of hearty food. There are 2 varieties in market, the small flat brown seed, called lentils à la reine, and a larger kind, about the size of peas, and of a greenish color. Both sorts are equally well flavored and nutritious. They cost 10 cents a pound, and can be bought at general groceries. The seed of the lentil tare, commonly cultivated in France and Germany as an article of food, ranks nearly as high as meat as a valuable food, being capable of sustaining life and vigor for a long time. This vegetable is gradually becoming known in this country from the use of it by our French and German citizens, and from its nutritive value it deserves to rank as high as our favorite New England beans. Lentils boiled plain. Wash 1 pound or 1 full pint of lentils, cost 10 cents, well in cold water. Put them over the fire in 3 quarts of cold water with 1 ounce of drippings, 1 tablespoonful of salt, and a saltspoonful of pepper, cost about 1 cent, and boil slowly until tender, that is about 3 hours. Drain off the little water which remains, add to the lentils 1 ounce of butter, a tablespoonful of chopped parsley, a teaspoonful of sugar, and a little more salt and pepper if required, cost about 3 cents, and serve them hot. Always save the water in which they are boiled. With the addition of a little thickening and seasoning, it makes a very nourishing soup. Stewed lentils. Put a pint of plain boiled lentils into a saucepan. Cover them with any kind of pot liquor. Add 1 ounce of chopped onion, 2 ounces of drippings, 1/4 ounce of chopped parsley, and stew gently for 20 minutes. Serve hot. This dish costs about 10 cents. Fried lentils. Fry 1 ounce of chopped onion brown in 2 ounces of drippings. Add 1 pint of plain boiled lentils. See if they are properly seasoned and brown them well. Serve hot. This dish costs about 10 cents and is very good and as nutritious as meat. Maize or Indian cornmeal. This native product is a strong and nutritious food and very economical. In addition to the ordinary hasty pudding or mush, it can be cooked with a little pot liquor, meat, or cheese, so as to be both good and wholesome. Below are some excellent receipts for cooking it. Polenta. Boil 1 pound of yellow Indian meal, cost 4 cents, for half an hour, in 2 quarts of pot liquor or boiling water, salted to taste, with 1 ounce of fat, stirring it occasionally to prevent burning. Then bake it for half an hour in a greased baking dish, and serve it either hot or, when cold, slice it and fry it in smoking hot fat. This favorite Italian dish is closely allied to the hasty pudding of New England and the mush of the South. It costs 5 cents. Cheese pudding. Into 2 quarts of boiling water containing 2 tablespoonfuls of salt, stir 1 pound of yellow Indian meal, cost 4 cents, and 1/4 pound of grated cheese, cost 4 cents. Boil it for 20 minutes, stirring it occasionally to prevent burning. Then put it in a greased baking pan. Sprinkle over the top 1/4 pound of grated cheese, cost 4 cents, and brown in a quick oven. Serve hot. If any remains, slice it cold and fry it brown. It costs 12 cents. Hasty pudding. Have boiling upon the fire 2 quarts of water with a level tablespoonful of salt. Sprinkle in gradually 1 pound of Indian meal, cost 4 cents, stirring constantly to prevent lumps, and boil steadily for 1 hour, stirring occasionally. The secret of making good hasty pudding is to boil it long enough to thoroughly cook it. Some persons first mix the meal with cold water until it forms a thick batter, and then stir this into the boiling water. The pudding can be eaten with a little milk, butter, or molasses, if they are desirable additions, or with some meat gravy, or melted and seasoned suet. When cold, it is good sliced and fried. Johnny cake. Mix 1 pound of Indian meal, cost 4 cents, 1 ounce of lard, cost 1 cent, and 1 teaspoonful of salt, with sufficient boiling water to make a stiff batter. Put it by the tablespoonful into a greased baking pan, and bake it thoroughly. 5 cents worth makes a hearty meal with a little butter or molasses. Indian cakes. These are prepared in the same way as Johnny cake, except that the batter is made about as thin as buckwheat cakes and baked upon a greased griddle over the fire instead of in the oven. The most economical way of greasing the griddle is to put a small piece of fat salt pork upon a fork and rub it over the surface of the griddle after it is well heated. Indian bread. Mix into 1 quart of boiling water enough Indian meal to make a thin batter, about 1/4 pound, cost 1 cent. When it has cooled, stir into it 1 pound of wheat flour, cost 4 cents, a level tablespoonful of salt, and 1 gill of yeast. Let it rise overnight, and then bake it in loaves. Boiled Indian pudding. Dissolve a level teaspoonful of soda in 1 pint of sour milk. Add to it 1 pint of molasses, cost 5 cents, 1/4 pound of chopped suet, cost 2 cents, 1/2 pound of Indian meal, cost 2 cents, and a level teaspoonful of salt. If you have no milk, use boiling water instead of it. Put the pudding into a scalded pudding bag or a pudding kettle, and this into a pot of boiling water. Boil steadily for 4 hours, adding boiling water as the quantity decreases. The pudding, when cooked, may be eaten with sauce or molasses, if desired. It will cost about 10 cents. Baked Indian pudding. Stir into a quart of boiling milk, cost 8 cents, 1/4 pound of Indian meal, cost 1 cent, 1 level teaspoonful of salt, the same of spice, and 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents. Last of all, add 1 pint of cold milk, cost 4 cents, or milk and water. Pour the pudding into an earthen dish and bake slowly for 3 hours. It will cost about 15 cents and be very nice. There is as much difference in the quality of Indian meal as there is in its preparation. Southern meal is undoubtedly finer than Northern, and Southern cooks are proverbial for their skill in using it. I am indebted for some of the preceding receipts to a friend in Maryland, and I advise my readers to buy Southern meal if they can get it, and test them thoroughly. Meal that is ground by hand or water power is superior to that ground by steam, because it is less heated in the process. Indian corn is an excellent food in temperate and warm climates, and from its abundant yield and easy cultivation, it is one of the cheapest of cereals. It contains the nitrates or flesh-forming properties in an excessive degree. It is a palatable and nutritious diet, whether eaten green, parched, or ground into meal. End of Chapter 6. Recording by Nan Dodge.
Chapter 7 of 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nan Dodge. 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Cheap Fish and Meat Dinners. I have already spoken of the value of fish as strengthening food, and in support of what I say, I need only to remind you how vigorous and healthy the inhabitants of the sea coast usually are, especially if they eat red-blooded fish. This fact, in connection with the abundance and cheapness of fish, makes it an important article in the dietary of the good housekeeper. Fish may be cooked by boiling, baking, broiling, and frying. Boiling is the least economical method of cooking fish, and fish soup or fish chowder the most saving. Broiled fish wastes but little of its nutriment, but its bulk is decreased. Baked fish ranks next to fish soup in point of economy. Fish are preserved for winter use by cleaning them, rubbing them with salt, packing them in layers, and covering them with brine. An excellent way of pickling fish is to clean them, cut off the heads, tails, and fins, wash them, and then rub them well in salt and spice. Pack them in layers in an earthen crock or deep dish, cover them with vinegar, and tie the jar over with buttered paper. They are then ready to bake slowly for about 4 hours, and will keep for 3 or 4 weeks after they are cooked. In London and other large English cities where fried fish forms an important item of popular food, it is cooked with great care and in such a manner as to retain all its nourishing qualities. It is well washed in salted water, dried on a clean cloth, cut in slices if large, dipped in a rather thin batter made of flour, salt, pepper, and cold water, and then dropped into a pan containing plenty of fat, heated until it is smoking hot but does not boil. The pan is then taken from the fire, and by the time the fat is growing cold, the fish is cooked. A novice would do best by maintaining the fat at the proper degree of heat until the fish is cooked. The receipts which I give for fish are calculated to produce compound dishes from it, hearty enough to make the bulk of a meal. Fish and potato pie. Use any cheap fish which does not cost more than 5 or 6 cents a pound, such as cod, haddock, or bluefish. Cut 2 pounds of fish, cost 12 cents, in pieces about 1 inch thick and 2 inches long. Lay them in a deep dish with a pint of cold gravy of any kind, or cold water. Season with a tablespoonful each of chopped parsley and onion, and a teaspoonful of salt, pepper, and thyme, mixed together in equal quantities, and sprinkled among the fish. Put it into the oven for 15 or 20 minutes to partly cook. Put 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, into boiling water, and boil until soft enough to mash. Mash them, season them with salt and pepper, and put them over the fish, which you must take from the oven, as a crust. Return the pie again to the oven to brown the crust, and then serve it with bread and butter. 25 cents will cover the cost of all, and the dinner will be a good one. Fish pudding. Make a plain paste by mixing 1/4 pound of lard or sweet drippings, cost 3 cents, with 1/2 pound of flour, cost 2 cents, a teaspoonful of salt, and just water enough to make a stiff paste. Roll it out, line the edges of a deep pudding dish with it halfway down. Fill the dish with layers of fresh codfish cut in small pieces. Using 2 pounds, cost 12 cents. Season each layer with salt, pepper, chopped parsley, and chopped onions, using 1 tablespoonful of salt, 1 saltspoonful of pepper, 2 bay leaves, a saltspoonful of thyme, 4 ounces of onion, and 1/2 ounce of parsley, cost 5 cents. Fill up the dish with any cold gravy, milk, or water, cover with paste, and bake 15 minutes in a quick oven. Finish by baking 1/2 hour in a moderate oven. Serve hot. With bread, the dinner will cost 25 cents. Fish and potato pudding. Wash and peel 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents. Peel and slice about 6 ounces of onions, cost 1 cent. Skin and bone 2 bloaters or large herrings, cost 5 cents. Put all these ingredients into a baking dish in layers, seasoning them with a dessert spoonful of salt and a saltspoonful of pepper. Pour over them any cold gravy you have on hand, or add 2 or 3 ounces of drippings. If you have neither of these, water will answer. Bake the pudding an hour and a half. Serve hot with bread. If you use drippings or milk, the entire seasoning will cost you less than 5 cents, and the whole dinner, which is excellent, not more than 15 cents. Codfish steaks. 2 pounds of codfish, which costs at the market from 4 to 7 cents, can be cut in steaks, dried well, and either dipped in flour or thin batter of flour, salt, pepper, and water, and fried in smoking hot fat, or can be served with a quart of boiled potatoes, cost 3 cents, and plenty of bread and butter, at the rate of about 20 cents a meal. Red herrings with potatoes. Soak a dozen herrings, cost 10 cents, in cold water for 1 hour. Dry and skin them, split them down the back and lay them in a pan with 2 ounces of drippings, 2 ounces of onion chopped fine, a saltspoonful of pepper, and 3 tablespoonfuls of vinegar, cost 2 cents, and set them in a moderate oven to brown for 10 or 15 minutes. Meantime, boil 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, with a ring of the paring taken off, in plenty of boiling water and salt, pouring off the water as soon as they are tender, and letting them stand on the back of the fire, covered with a dry towel for 5 minutes. Serve them with the herrings, taking care to dish both quite hot. With bread and butter, a plentiful dinner can be had for about 22 cents. Cheap meats. Those parts of meat which are called the cheap cuts, such as the head, brains, tongue, tripe, kidneys, haslet or pluck, feet, and tail, are eaten much more frequently in Europe than in this country, and are worthy of all the use they get there, for their proportion of flesh-forming elements is large. This is especially the case with the lights or lungs, but as they are rather difficult to digest, they should be thoroughly cooked and never eaten alone. Tripe and pig's feet, on the contrary, are very easily digested, but on this account are not a satisfactory food as that which remains longer in the stomach, although they are both savory and cheap. Be careful to keep all meat stews closely covered, or a great deal of the nutriment of the meat will escape in the steam. Sheep's head stew. Thoroughly clean a sheep's head, weighing about 3 pounds, cost about 10 cents. Put it over the fire with a quarter of a pound of rice, cost 3 cents, 2 cents worth of onions sliced, a level tablespoonful of salt, quarter of a teaspoonful of pepper, and 3 pints of cold water. Bring it slowly to a boil, skimming it carefully, and then add 5 cents worth of carrots and turnips, peeled and quartered. Let all simmer gently together for 2 hours, being careful to remove all grease, and see if the seasoning is correct before dishing the stew. With bread or boiled potatoes, the meal will cost about 25 cents. Oxtail stew. Put 2 jointed oxtails, cost about 10 cents, over the fire, in 1 quart of cold water, and scald them to remove the strong flavor. Then roll the joints in flour, season them with salt and pepper, and pack them in an earthen jar, with 1 onion chopped, and 1 quart of potatoes peeled and sliced. The vegetables and seasoning will cost about 5 cents. Add 1 pint of water, put on the cover of the jar and cement it in place with a paste of flour and water, which you must grease a little to prevent cracking. Then put the jar into a moderately hot oven and bake it about 4 hours. With the addition of bread and butter, it makes a hearty meal and costs about 22 cents. Beef pie. Cut in 2-inch pieces 2 pounds of the neck of beef, cost 12 cents. Brown them quickly in 1 ounce of drippings, cost 1 cent. Season them with pepper and salt. Put them into a pudding dish in layers with 1 cent's worth of chopped onion and 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, peeled and sliced. Add enough cold water to cover the beef and vegetables and put over them a crust made of 1 pound of flour, cost 4 cents, and 1/4 pound of lard, cost 3 cents. Put it for 15 minutes into a hot oven, and then bake for an hour and a half in a moderate one. It will cost less than 25 cents and be an abundant meal. Baked heart. Thoroughly wash a beef's heart, cost 10 cents. Stuff it with half a loaf of stale bread, cost 2 cents. Moistened with warm water and seasoned with 1 teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 teaspoonful each of pepper, chopped parsley and sweet herbs, an onion chopped, and 1 ounce of sweet drippings. Cost of all these 2 cents. Lay it in a dripping pan with 5 cents worth of parsnips, scraped and washed, and bake in a moderate oven about 2 hours. It may be baked in an earthen jar, like the oxtail stew, and all its goodness will be saved. Parsnips are exceedingly nutritious and cheap, but if they are not liked, potatoes may be substituted for them. The entire dinner with bread and butter will cost about 25 cents. Stewed kidneys and potatoes. Wash 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents. Pare off 1 ring from each and put them to boil in well-salted boiling water. Choose a very fresh beef's kidney, cost 15 cents. Cut it in thin slices, removing all the white vessels and membranes. Fry it quickly for 5 minutes in 1 ounce of smoking hot drippings, cost 1 cent. Season with half a teaspoonful of salt and 1/4 teaspoonful of pepper, a teaspoonful each of chopped parsley, onion, and vinegar. Shake into it from the dredging box 1 tablespoonful of flour. Add 1 pint of boiling water and boil gently for 15 minutes. By this time the potatoes will be done, and both dishes must be served at once because the kidneys will grow tough and indigestible if they are cooked more than 20 minutes in all. They will make a plentiful dinner including bread and butter for about 25 cents. Pig's kidneys may be cooked in the same manner, and enough can be bought for 10 cents to make a good-sized dish. Kidney pudding. Cut the kidneys, season, and stew them as above, making meantime a crust from 1 pound of flour, 2 teaspoonfuls of salt, and 1 of baking powder, sifted together. Mix into these ingredients 4 ounces of finely chopped suet, cost 2 cents. Make them into a paste with about 1 pint of cold water. Use part of this to line a deep pudding dish, into which put the stewed kidneys. Cover the dish with the rest of the paste and bake it about 1 hour and 1/4 in a regular moderately hot oven. The pudding will cost about 30 cents. Gammon dumpling. Make a plain paste of 1 pound of flour, cost 4 cents, 1 dessertspoonful of salt and 1 of baking powder, 1/4 pound of finely chopped suet or scraps, cost 2 cents. And sufficient cold water to mix it to a stiff dough. Roll this out about 1/2 inch thick, spread over it 1/2 pound of any cheap cut of bacon or ham, finely chopped. Cost 6 cents. Roll up the dumpling as you would a roly-poly pudding. Tie it tightly in a clean cloth and boil it in boiling water, or boiling pot liquor, for about 3 hours. Do not let the pot stop boiling or the dumpling will be heavy. Serve it hot with 1 quart of plain boiled potatoes, cost 3 cents. The dinner will cost 15 cents. Bacon and apple roly-poly. Boil a pound of bacon, cost 12 cents, for half an hour. Then slice it thin, peel and slice 3 cents worth of apples and the same quantity of onions. Make a stiff dough of 1 pound of flour, cost 4 cents, a teaspoonful of salt, and cold water. Roll it out 1/2 inch thick. Lay the bacon, apples, and onion all over it, roll it up, tie it tightly in a clean cloth, and boil it about 2 hours in plenty of boiling water. Serve it with 3 cents worth of boiled potatoes or boiled cabbage. The dinner will cost 25 cents. Mutton and onions. Choose a shoulder of mutton weighing about 3 pounds, which you can buy at 6 cents a pound. Wipe it thoroughly with a damp cloth. Put it into a pot half full of boiling water, with a tablespoonful of salt, and boil it gently for 2 hours, skimming the pot as often as any scum rises. Half an hour before it is done, slice 1 quart of onions, cost 5 cents. Boil them in a pint of boiling water for about 20 minutes. Add 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents. Half a pint of milk, cost 2 cents. 4 tablespoonfuls of flour, cost 1 cent. 1 teaspoonful of salt, and pepper to taste. When you have put the onions over the fire, pare rings off a quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, and boil them in well-salted boiling water. Have all 3 dishes ready at once, and serve them together hot. Save the broth from the mutton, and the next morning boil it up once, and serve it for breakfast, with half a loaf of stale bread, toasted, and cut in dice, or boil in it for 20 minutes, 1/4 pound of rice or macaroni. The dinner will cost you about 30 cents, and you have on hand the broth for breakfast. Pork and onions. 3 pounds of the neck or spare ribs of fresh pork, which you can buy at the packing houses for 3 cents a pound, can be made into a capital dinner, which will cost only about 20 cents by following the above receipt. Veal and rice. Put the scrag end of a neck of veal, which you can usually buy for 10 cents, into a pot half full of boiling water, with a half tablespoonful of salt and half a pound of bacon or salt pork, cost 6 cents. Half a pound of rice, cost 5 cents, and an onion stuck with 6 cloves. Boil it gently for 3 hours, and then serve it hot, the meat in the middle of the platter and the rice laid around it. The broth may be served for breakfast as in the receipt for mutton and onions. The dinner will cost about 20 cents. Irish stew. Cut 2 pounds of the flank of beef, cost 15 cents or less, in pieces about 2 inches square. Rub them well with pepper and salt. Peel and slice 1 quart of onions, cost 5 cents. Place beef and onions in a saucepan with just enough cold water to cover them, and stew them gently for 1½ hours. Then add 1 quart of peeled potatoes, cost 3 cents, and boil the stew until the potatoes are soft, which will be in about 20 minutes. Serve at once hot. The dish will cost 23 cents. Sheep's haslet. Peel and slice 1 quart of onions, cost 5 cents. Wash and slice a sheep's haslet, cost 6 cents. Put 2 ounces of drippings, cost 2 cents, in the bottom of a dripping pan. Strew the onions upon it, and lay the haslet on them, seasoning it with a teaspoonful of salt, and 1 of thyme, savory, allspice, and pepper, using equal parts of each. Add enough water to reach halfway to the top of the meat, then cover it thickly with the crumbs from half a loaf of stale bread, and bake all together for 1 hour and a half in a moderate oven. The whole dish will not cost over 17 cents, and it is nutritious and savory. Baked pig's head. Buy at a packing house half a medium-sized pig's head, which you can get for 3 or 4 cents a pound. The piece will cost about 10 cents. Clean and wash it well. Pare and slice 1 quart of onions, cost 5 cents. Chop 1/4 pound of suet, cost 2 cents, and grate half a loaf of stale bread, cost 3 cents. Put into a dripping pan 1 ounce of drippings, cost 1 cent, 1 gill of vinegar, cost 1 cent, then the onions, next the head, skin up, and last the bread, suet, and seasoning, well mixed, and bake in a moderate oven for about 1½ hours. The dish will cost about 22 cents. It is hearty and extremely nutritious. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Nan Dodge.
Chapter 8 of 25-Cent Dinners for Families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-Cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Sunday Dinners. Sunday is the working man's festival. It is not only a day of rest from manual labor, a breathing space in his struggle for existence, an interval during which his devotional aspirations may have full exercise. It is the forerunner of a new phase of life, in which toil is laid aside for the gentler occupations of home, if he is a man of family, and for rest and relaxation in any case. The duty of making home pleasant, which a good wife feels, is doubly felt upon the days when the breadwinner abides in it. The husband of such a wife seldom passes his Sundays in strange places. He is content to accept the day according to its recognized signification, and when it is past, he is all the more ready to begin his daily work again. Because much of the comfort of home depends upon good and economical meals, and because Sunday dinners ought to be better than those of working days, we must make Monday dinners supplementary to them. The cost of Saturday night's marketing must be divided between the 2 days, in order to keep within our financial margin. Good examples of this management may be found in the receipts given in this chapter for roast fowl and fried chicken, a la mode beef and meat patties, boiled mutton and kromskis, and roast veal and ham patties. These receipts show how by the exercise of a little judgment in buying and economy in managing food, we can have our Sunday fowl or joint of meat without incurring any expense unwarranted by the figures to which this little book confines us. Roast fowl. You can generally buy a fowl for about $1 a pound. It need not be tender, but it ought to be fleshy in order to furnish the basis for 2 meals. Choose a fowl which will cost 50 cents or less. Pluck all the pin feathers, singe off the hairs with a piece of burning paper or a little alcohol poured on a plate and lighted with a match. Then wipe the fowl with a clean damp cloth, draw it carefully by slitting the skin at the back of the neck and taking out the crop without tearing the skin of the breast. Loosen the heart, liver, and lungs by introducing the forefinger at the neck, and then draw them with the entrails from the vent. Unless you have broken the gall or the entrails in drawing the bird, do not wash it, for this greatly impairs the flavor, and partly destroys the nourishing qualities of the flesh. Twist the tips of the wings back under the shoulders, bend the legs as far up toward the breast as possible, secure the thigh bones in that position by a trussing cord or skewer, then bring the legs down and fasten them close to the vent. Put the bird into a pot containing 3 quarts of boiling water, with 1 tablespoonful of salt, an onion stuck with half a dozen cloves, and a bouquet of sweet herbs, made as directed on page 19. Skim it as soon as it boils, and as often as any scum rises. If you wish to stuff the fowl, use a forcemeat made as follows. Cost 10 cents, and carefully sew it up in the carcass. Forcemeat, or stuffing. Cut 2 ounces of salt pork, cost 2 cents, in 1/4-inch dice, and fry it brown in half an ounce of drippings, with 1 ounce of chopped onions. While these ingredients are frying, soak 5 cents worth of stale bread in tepid water, and then wring it dry in a napkin. Add it to the onion when it is brown, with 1 tablespoonful of chopped parsley, half a saltspoonful of powdered thyme, and the same quantity of dried and powdered celery, and white pepper, and 1 teaspoonful of salt. Mix all these over the fire until they are scalding hot, and cleave from the pan. Then stir in 1 raw egg and stuff the fowl with it. It is good stuffing for any kind of poultry or meat. A few ounces of grated cheese make it superlatively good. Meantime, while the fowl is boiling, peel 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, and lay them in cold water. At the end of 1 hour take the fowl from the pot, taking care to strain and save the pot liquor. Put it into a dripping pan with the potatoes, season them both with a teaspoonful of salt and 1/4 teaspoonful of pepper, and put them in a rather quick oven to bake for about 1 hour. When both are well done and nicely browned, take them up on hot dishes and keep them hot while you make the following gravy. Chicken gravy. Pour 1 pint of boiling water into the dripping pan in which the fowl was baked. While it is boiling up, mix 1 heaping tablespoonful or 1 ounce of flour with half a cup of cold water, and stir it smoothly into the gravy. Season it to taste with pepper and salt, and send it in a bowl to the table with the chicken and potatoes. In carving the chicken, cut off the drumsticks, wings, and neck carefully, and lay them aside. Use the second joints, breast, and fleshy parts for dinner, and after dinner cut up what remains of the carcass in neat pieces, which you must save with the pieces first cut off to use for fried chicken. Half the cost of the roast chicken stuffed and the baked potatoes will be 38 cents. Fried chicken. Dip the pieces of chicken saved from the Sunday dinner into a batter made according to the following receipt, and fry it a delicate brown color in 1/4 pound of olive oil or sweet drippings or lard. Cost 3 cents. Heated until it is smoking hot. Before you begin to fry the chicken, wash 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, pare off a ring from each, and put them to boil in plenty of well-salted boiling water. When the chicken is done, take it up with a strainer and lay it for a few minutes on brown paper to free it from fat. Then serve it hot with the boiled potatoes. Frying batter. This batter will do nicely for chicken, fish, clams, cold boiled parsnips, or fruit of any kind, of which you wish to make fritters. The oil is added to it for the purpose of making it crisp. Many persons object to the use of oil in cooking from a most foolish prejudice. It is a pure vegetable fat, wholesome and nutritious in the highest degree, and the sooner our American housewives learn to use it in cooking, the better it will be for both health and purse. I do not mean the expensive oil sold at fine grocery stores for $1 a bottle, but a good sweet kind which can be bought at French épicerie or German delicatessen depots for about $2.50 a gallon. Make the batter by mixing together 4 heaping tablespoonfuls of flour, cost 1 cent, a level teaspoonful of salt, the yolk of 1 egg, cost 1 or 2 cents, 2 tablespoonfuls of oil, cost 1 cent, and 1 gill of water, or a quantity sufficient to make a thick batter. Just as you are ready to use it, beat the white of the egg and stir it into the batter. The cost will be 3 or 4 cents, and the use of it will double the size and nicety of your dish. Chicken broth. Heat the broth in which the fowl for Sunday dinner was boiled, and when it is at the boiling point, throw in 1/4 pound of rice or fine macaroni, which will cost 3 or 4 cents, and boil it about 20 minutes, or until tender. See if the seasoning is right, and serve it hot. New York Cooking School fricassee. Prepare a fowl weighing about 3 pounds, cost 3 shillings, as directed in the receipt for roast fowl. Cut it in neat joints, fry it quickly in 1 ounce of sweet drippings, cost 1 cent, till brown. Cover it with boiling water, add 1 teaspoonful of salt and 1/4 level teaspoonful of pepper, and stew it gently until tender, keeping it covered closely. When it is about half done, add to it some dumplings made as follows. Suet dumplings. Make into a stiff paste, with about 2 gills of cold water, half a pound of flour, cost 2 cents, 1/4 pound of chopped suet, cost 2 cents, a teaspoonful of salt, and the same quantity of baking powder sifted with the flour. Drop the paste into the fricassee from a teaspoon dipped in cold water, and let them boil with it. These dumplings cost less than 5 cents and are nice with any stew, soup, or fricassee. Rabbit curry. Choose a tender rabbit or hare which will cost at the market about 20 cents, and which if young will be plump and have a short neck, thick knees, and forepaws whose joints break easily. Hang it by the hind legs and skin it, beginning at the tail and ending at the head, Wipe it carefully with a damp cloth to remove the hairs, take out the entrails, saving the brains, heart, and liver. Rinse out the carcass with a cup of vinegar. Cost 2 cents, which you must save, and cut it in joints. Lay the rabbit in a deep frying pan with 2 ounces of drippings. Cost 2 cents. 1 cent's worth of onions sliced, a teaspoonful of salt, 10 whole cloves, and quarter of a level teaspoonful of pepper. Fry it gently for 20 minutes, then add 1 cent's worth of parsley, the vinegar, half a level tablespoonful of curry, and 1 tablespoonful of flour mixed with half a teacupful of water, and simmer all gently for 15 minutes, keeping the pan closely covered. When the rabbit is first put upon the fire, put quarter of a pound of rice, cost 4 cents, into 2 quarts of boiling water with 1 tablespoonful of salt, and boil it until the ends of the grains begin to crack open. Turn it from the pot into a colander, drain it, shake it back into the pot, and cover it to keep it hot until the rabbit is done. Then send it to the table with the rabbit, but on a dish by itself. The rabbit curry and rice will cost about 28 cents. Rabbit pie. Prepare a rabbit or hare, cost 20 cents, as for the curry, and after you have jointed it, roll each piece in flour, salt and pepper mixed, slice 2 cents worth of onions, peel and slice 3 cents worth of potatoes, and put these into a pudding dish in layers with the rabbit. Season with a teaspoonful of salt and quarter of a level teaspoonful of pepper. Add half a pint of cold water, cover the pie with a plain paste made as for suet dumplings, cost 5 cents, and bake for 1 hour and a quarter. These quantities will cost about 30 cents and make a large pie. Pickled shad. In season, fine, large shad can be bought for 25 cents, and each one will be enough for 2 hearty meals. Thoroughly clean a fresh shad, cut it in pieces about 3 inches square, lay it in a deep baking dish or earthen crock, seasoning it well with 2 tablespoonfuls of salt, 1 level teaspoonful of pepper, 1 dozen whole cloves, 2 bay leaves broken, and a bit of lemon or orange peel, if you have it. Pour over it enough vinegar to cover it, tie an oiled or buttered paper over the top of the dish or crock, and bake the shad 5 hours in a moderate oven. The action of the pickle will be to entirely soften the bones of the fish, so that every part of it will be eatable. 1/2 of it will cost about 15 cents, and with the addition of 5 cents worth of bread or potatoes will make a hearty dinner for 20 cents. Pork pie. Cut in 2-inch pieces 2 pounds of pork trimmings, cost 10 cents. Roll them in flour, season them with 2 teaspoonfuls of salt, quarter of a level teaspoonful of pepper, and 1 teaspoonful of curry. Put them in a deep baking pan or dish with 2 cents worth of onions and 3 cents worth of potatoes, peeled and sliced. Add half a pint of cold water and bake the pie slowly for 1 hour and a quarter. It will cost about 15 cents made as above, or a suet crust made as directed for suet dumplings may be added for 5 cents more. If the taste of curry is not liked, it may be omitted. Pork chops. Buy at a packing house 2 pounds of shoulder chops, cost 16 to 20 cents. Roll them in flour, pepper, and salt, put them into a hot frying pan, and fry them brown, cooking them at least 20 minutes. Meantime, boil 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, in boiling water and salt, and chop fine 1 pickle, cost 1 cent. When the chops are done, take them up and keep them hot. While you make the gravy, by pouring into the frying pan half a pint of boiling water and adding to it the chopped pickle, a tablespoonful of flour mixed smooth with half a cup of cold water, and salt and pepper to taste. Boil it up once, pour it over the chops, and serve them hot with the potatoes. The dinner will cost about 25 cents. Roast pork and apples. Season 2 pounds of shoulder chops, cost 20 cents or less, with salt and pepper and powdered sage, and put them in a deep baking dish with 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents. 2 cents worth of onions and 2 cents worth of apples, peeled and sliced. Add half a pint of cold water and bake 2 hours in a moderate oven. The dish will cost 27 cents or less. Stewed sausage. Prick 1.5 pounds of sausages. Cost 18 cents. Lay them in hot water for 3 minutes, roll them in flour, put them in a hot frying pan, and fry them brown. Take them up and fry about half a loaf of stale bread sliced, in the same pan. Put this on a platter, lay the sausages on it, and pour over them a gravy made as follows. After taking up the sausages, pour into the pan half a pint of boiling water, season it to taste with salt and pepper, thicken it with 1 tablespoonful of flour mixed smooth in half a cupful of cold water. Add to it 1 chopped pickle. Boil it up and pour it over the sausages and bread. The seasoning and flour will cost 2 cents, the bread 3, and the whole dish about 23 cents. If you serve it with a quart of plain boiled potatoes, it will cost 25 or 26 cents. German potatoes. Carefully wash 1 quart of potatoes, removing any defective part. Cut a slice from the top of the potatoes, take out a little of the inside, chop it fine, mix it with half a pound of highly seasoned sausage or mincemeat, cost 6 cents. Fill it into the potatoes, put on the piece you first cut off, and bake them for about 3/4 of an hour in a quick oven. Serve them as soon as they are soft. 10 cents will cover the entire cost, and they will make a very hearty and nutritious meal, especially if the meat used is pork. Brain and liver pudding. You can generally buy a pig's brain and haslet at the slaughterhouse for about 10 cents. Wash them thoroughly, slice the heart, liver, and lights, and fry them light brown in a cent's worth of drippings. Put the brain over the fire in cold water with a tablespoonful each of salt and vinegar. Let it boil for 15 minutes and then lay it in cold water to get hard. Make a suet crust as directed for suet dumplings, cost 5 cents. Roll out a cover for the pudding, line the edges of the dish 2 inches down with it, and put any bits you may have remaining into the dish in layers with the haslet and brain sliced. Season the pudding with 1 level tablespoonful of salt, 1 onion chopped, and half a level teaspoonful of pepper. Cover it with the suet crust and bake it for about an hour in a moderate oven. Serve it hot. The pudding will make a very hearty dinner at a cost of about 15 cents. Broiled kidneys. Mix together in a deep plate the following ingredients, which will cost about 3 cents. 1 ounce of butter, half a level teaspoonful of pepper, 1 teaspoonful each of mustard and any table sauce or vinegar, and as much cayenne as you can take up on the point of a small pen knife blade. Toast half a loaf of stale bread, cost 3 cents. Cut in slices 1 inch thick, wash, split, and broil 1 pound of pig's or sheep's kidneys, cost 10 cents or less. While the kidneys are broiling, dip the toast in the first named seasonings, lay it on a hot dish, and lay the kidneys on it as soon as they are broiled. Season them with salt and pepper, and serve them hot with 1 quart of plain boiled potatoes, cost 3 cents. The cost of the entire dinner will be less than 20 cents. Tripe, curry, and rice. Thoroughly wash 2 pounds of tripe, cost 16 cents. Boil it until tender, about 1 hour, in plenty of water and salt. Then lay it on a clean, dry cloth to drain. Put half a pound of rice, cost 5 cents, into the same water, and boil it fast for 20 minutes. Cut the tripe in pieces 2 inches square, slice 2 cents worth of onions, frying them in 2 ounces of drippings, cost 2 cents. Season with 1 teaspoonful of salt, quarter of a level teaspoonful of pepper, and 1 tablespoonful of vinegar. Add to the tripe and cook all together for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally to prevent burning. Just as you are ready to serve it, stir in 1 teaspoonful of curry, which, with the other seasonings, will cost 2 cents. Drain the rice in a colander, shake it into a dish, and send it to the table with the tripe. The dinner will cost 27 cents and be very satisfactory. Liver polenta. Boil 1 pound of yellow Indian meal, cost 4 cents, for half an hour in 2 quarts of boiling water with 1 ounce of drippings, cost 1 cent, stirring it occasionally to prevent burning. Meantime, fry in 1 ounce of drippings, cost 1 cent. A sheep's or pig's haslet, cost 5 cents, well washed and sliced. When the meal has boiled half an hour, Put it into a greased baking dish with the haslet, seasoning each layer with salt and pepper. Bake it for 20 minutes in a quick oven and serve it hot. The dish, which is palatable and nutritious, costs less than 12 cents. A la mode beef. This is one of the compound dishes which are mentioned in the beginning of this chapter, and will serve as a basis for at least 2 good dinners. Unless there is an unusual rise in the price of meat, you can buy the round of beef for $1 a pound at the market or provision house. In the middle of the week, choose 4 pounds in a solid thick piece. Cut half a pound of fat pork, cost 6 cents, into strips, half an inch square. Thrust the steel you use for sharpening knives into the meat in the direction of the grain, and put the strips of pork into the holes you make. Cut up 5 cents worth of carrot, turnips, onion, and parsley, lay them in the bottom of an earthen crock or deep bowl with 2 tablespoonfuls of salt and 1 teaspoonful of pepper. Put the beef on them and pour over it 1 pint of vinegar and enough water to just cover the meat. The vinegar and seasoning will cost 5 cents. Turn a plate over the meat and put a clean stone on it to keep the meat under the pickle. Turn the meat every day, keeping it in a cool place. Sunday morning, as soon as breakfast is over, put the meat, pickle, and vegetables over the fire in a clean pot and let them stew uncovered until the pickle is all evaporated and the meat is nicely browned. Then sprinkle over it 2 tablespoonfuls of flour and let that brown, turning the meat over occasionally. Then add enough boiling water to cover the meat, put on the pot cover, and set it where it will simmer gently for at least 3 hours. During the last half hour, boil 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, in plenty of boiling water and salt. When the meat is done, take it upon a platter, strain the gravy over it, and serve it hot with the boiled potatoes. About half of it will be enough for dinner, and will cost with the potatoes 35 cents. Meat patties. Chop the remainder of the a la mode beef. Make a suet crust, cost 5 cents, as directed for suet dumplings. Roll it out 1/4 inch thick, cut it out with a round tin cutter, lay a tablespoonful of the minced meat on each round, wet the edges of the crust, and fold it over in the shape of an old-fashioned turnover. Pinch the edges together, put the patties on a floured baking pan, and bake them about half an hour in a moderate oven. When you put them in the oven, put 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents, to boil in boiling water and salt. When both potatoes and patties are done, serve them together. The dinner will cost about 30 cents. Boiled mutton. The shoulder of mutton can be bought at the market for about 6 cents a pound. Choose one weighing not over 4 pounds, cost 24 cents. Wipe it with a clean damp cloth, put it into 3 quarts of boiling water with a tablespoonful of salt, 1 cent's worth of soup greens, a level teaspoonful of pepper, and boil it gently 15 minutes for each pound, skimming it as often as any scum rises. About 1 hour before it is done, pare 1 quart of turnips, cut them in quarters, and boil them with the mutton. Wash 1 quart of potatoes, pare off a ring from each, and boil them in boiling water. Serve them with the mutton and turnips, saving the broth from the mutton for bread broth for breakfast. The potatoes and turnips will cost 5 cents, and the proportionate cost of the mutton will be 12 cents, so the dinner will cost 17 cents. The remains of the mutton must be saved for mutton réchauffé as the basis of the next day's dinner. Mutton réchauffé. Prepare and boil 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents. Slice the best part of the mutton remaining from the day before, saving all the scraps and trimmings. Dip each slice in a beaten egg or a little milk, cost 1 cent. Roll it in breadcrumbs, dried and sifted, as directed on page 25, and fry them in sweet drippings. Serve the meat and potatoes together. They will cost about 15 cents. Mutton krumskis. Cut cold mutton in half-inch dice, chop 1 ounce of onion, and fry it pale yellow in 1 ounce of sweet drippings. Cost 1 cent. Add 1 ounce of flour and stir until smooth. Add half a pint of water, 2 tablespoonfuls of chopped parsley, 1 level teaspoonful of salt, 1 level saltspoonful of white pepper, half a saltspoonful of powdered herbs, as much cayenne as can be taken up on the point of a very small penknife blade, and the chopped meat. The seasonings will cost about 1 cent. Stir until scalding hot, add the yolk of 1 raw egg, cost 1 cent. Cook for 2 minutes, stirring frequently, and turn out to cool on a flat dish, slightly oiled or buttered, to prevent sticking. Spreading the minced meat about an inch thick, set away to cool while the batter is being made. Plain frying batter. Mix 1/4 pound of flour, cost 1 cent, with the yolks of 2 raw eggs, cost 2 cents, a level saltspoonful of salt, half a saltspoonful of pepper, 1/4 saltspoonful of grated nutmeg, 1 tablespoonful of salad oil, which is used to make the batter crisp, and 1 cup of water, more or less, as the flour will take it up. The batter should be stiff enough to hold the drops from the spoon in shape when they are let fall upon it. Now beat the whites of the 2 eggs to a stiff froth, beginning slowly, and increasing the speed until you are beating as fast as you can. The froth will surely come. Then stir it lightly into the batter, heat the dish containing the meat a moment to loosen it, and turn it out on the table, just dusted with powdered crackers. Cut it in strips an inch wide and 2 inches long. Roll them lightly under the palm of the hand in the shape of corks. Dip them in the batter and fry them golden brown in smoking hot fat. Serve them on a neatly folded napkin. They make a delicious dish, really worth all the care taken in preparing them. The seasoning, crackers, and what fat is used in frying will not cost over 4 cents, for you must strain the fat and save it after you fry your kromskis. If you use either bread or potatoes with them, the dinner will not cost over 20 cents. Epigram of lamb. This is one of my favorite dishes, which I learned to make the first winter I had a cooking school, and I believe that nearly everyone who tries it will share my opinion of it. Choose as tender a 2-pound breast of mutton as you can buy for about 6 cents a pound. Boil it in 2 quarts of water about 3/4 of an hour, or until you can easily pull out the bones, taking care to put it into boiling water with a tablespoonful of salt, and skim it as often as any scum arises. When it is done, strain and save the pot liquor for bread or rice broth. Pull out the bones from the breast of mutton, lay it between 2 platters, and put a flat iron on it until it is cold. Then cut it in triangular pieces, taking care not to waste a scrap. Roll the pieces in a beaten egg, cost 1 cent, and dried breadcrumbs prepared as directed on page 25, and fry them as you would the kromskis in the previous receipt. Use the pot liquor in which it is boiled with 1/4 pound of rice for the next morning's breakfast. The cost of both dishes will not exceed 20 cents. Roast veal. The shoulder of veal can usually be bought at the market for 8 cents a pound. Choose a fresh one weighing about 7 pounds and costing about 60 cents. From this we shall make 3 dishes, namely roast veal, blanquette of veal, and veal and ham patties. Therefore the proportionate cost for the roast veal will be 20 cents. Have the butcher chop off the foreleg quite close up to the shoulder and cut it in neat slices about 1 inch thick. These you must sprinkle with salt and pepper and keep in a cool place, together with the blade bone, until the next day, for the blanquette. Have the shoulder boned, saving the blade. Stuff it with the following forcemeat. Forcemeat for veal or poultry. Steep 4 ounces of dry bread, cost 2 cents, in warm water, and wring it dry in a clean towel. Chop 1 cent's worth of onion and fry it light yellow in 1 cent's worth of drippings. Add the bread to it, season it with 1 level teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 level teaspoonful each of pepper and powdered thyme or mixed spice, and stir these ingredients over the fire until they are scalding hot. Then stir in 1 egg and use the stuffing. The cost will be about 5 cents. After stuffing the shoulder, lay it in a dripping pan with 1 cent's worth of soup greens, and put it in a hot oven to brown it quickly. When it is brown, take it out of the oven, season with salt and pepper, baste it with a little sweet drippings, return it to the oven, and bake it thoroughly 15 minutes to each pound. Meantime, wash 1 quart of potatoes, cost 3 cents. Pare a ring off each one, and boil them in plenty of boiling water and salt. When the veal is done, take it up on a hot dish, pour half a pint of boiling water in the dripping pan, Scrape it well and strain the contents. Set this gravy again over the fire to boil while you mix a tablespoonful of flour in half a cup of cold water. Stir this smoothly into the gravy, boil it for 5 minutes, and serve it with the roast veal and boiled potatoes. Be careful to save all that remains from the dinner towards making the veal and ham patties. The proportionate cost will be about 30 cents. Blanquette of veal. Put the pieces of veal saved for this dish into enough cold water to cover them, together with a tablespoonful of salt and 1 cent's worth of soup greens, the onion being stuck with 10 cloves. Skim occasionally whenever any scum rises, and simmer until the meat is tender, which will be in half or 3/4 of an hour. Then take up the meat in a colander and run some cold water over it from the faucet. Strain the pot liquor and let it boil again. Mix together over the fire 1 tablespoonful of butter, cost 2 cents, and 2 of flour. When they are smooth, add 1 quart of the boiling broth to them, season with a teaspoonful of salt, 1/4 of a level teaspoonful of white pepper, and 1/4 of a nutmeg grated. Mix the yolks of 2 eggs, cost 2 cents, with about a cupful of the broth, and stir them into the rest. Then put in the veal and heat and serve it with a quart of boiled potatoes. Cost 3 cents. The dinner will cost about 30 cents. Veal and ham patties. Chop the remains of the roast veal, cost 20 cents, with 1/4 pound of lean ham, cost 4 cents. Weigh both and mix with them an equal weight of dried bread, soaked in warm water and wrung dry in a clean towel. Season with salt, pepper, and powdered herbs, or spice salt to taste. Moisten with any cold gravy you have saved from the roast veal, and fill it into little turnovers or patty pans lined with a suet crust, made as directed on page 53 for suet dumplings. Cost 5 cents. The dinner will cost about 30 cents. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of 25-cent dinners for families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-cent dinners for families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Chapter 9. Cheap puddings, pies, and cakes. Good puddings are nutritious and wholesome, and an excellent variety can be made at a comparatively small expense. Pies, as they are usually made with greasy and indigestible pastry, are positively unhealthy. If they are made with a plain bottom crust and abundantly filled with ripe fresh or dried fruit, they are not so objectionable. Rich cake is always an extravagance, but some of the plainer kinds are pleasant additions to lunch and supper. We subjoin a few good receipts. Swiss pudding. Sift together half a pound of flour. Cost 2 cents. 1 heaping teaspoonful of baking powder and 1 of salt. Rub together 4 ounces of granulated sugar. Cost 3 cents. And 2 ounces of butter. Cost 4 cents. And when they are well mixed, so as to be granular but not creamy, add the flour gradually until all is used. Make a hollow in the middle of the flour, put into it 1 egg, half a teaspoonful of lemon flavoring, and half a pint of milk. Cost of these ingredients, 4 cents. Mix to a smooth paste. Put into a well-buttered and floured mold, and set this into a large pot with boiling water, enough to come 2/3 up the side of the mold. Steam the pudding 3/4 of an hour, or until you can run a broom splint into it without finding the pudding stick to the splint. Turn the pudding out of the mold and send it to the table with the following sauce. Cream sauce. Stir together over the fire 1 ounce each of flour and butter. Cost 2 cents. As soon as they are smooth, pour into them half a pint of boiling milk. Cost 2 cents. Add 2 ounces of sugar and half a teaspoonful of lemon flavoring. Cost 2 cents. And use with the pudding as soon as it boils up. The sauce and pudding will cost about 20 cents. College puddings. Mixed well together 8 ounces of dried and sifted breadcrumbs. Cost 3 cents. 2 ounces of very finely chopped suet. Cost 2 cents. 2 ounces of currants, 2 eggs, and 2 ounces of sugar. Cost together 5 cents. A teaspoonful of salt, 3 grates of nutmeg, and sufficient milk to moisten, about 1 cent's worth. Make the puddings up in little round balls, roll them first in sifted bread crumbs. Next, dip them in beaten egg, and then roll them again in bread crumbs. Fry them in plenty of hot fat, and serve them with sugar dusted over them. 5 cents will cover the cost of frying them, and a nice dishful will cost you about 18 cents. Cream rice pudding. Wash 4 ounces of rice, cost 3 cents, through 2 waters. Put it into a baking dish with 3 ounces of sugar and a teaspoonful of flavoring, cost 3 cents. Pour in 1 quart and a pint of milk, cost 12 cents, and put it into a moderate oven to bake an hour and a half, or until it is of a creamy consistency. This pudding is very delicate and wholesome and costs 15 cents. Half pay pudding. Carefully wash and dry a quarter of a pound of Zante currants, cost 3 cents. Stone the same quantity of raisins, cost 3 cents, and chop an equal amount of suet, cost 2 cents. Mix them with 8 ounces of stale bread, cost 3 cents. 3 tablespoonfuls of molasses, half a pint of milk, and a teaspoonful each of spice, salt, and baking powder, cost 4 cents. Put these ingredients into a mold which has been well buttered and floured, and steam them about 3 hours. If by any mischance the top of the pudding is watery, you can remedy it by putting it into a hot oven for 10 or 15 minutes to brown. When you are ready to use it, turn it from the mold and send it to the table with some cream sauce. This is an excellent plum pudding and costs only about 20 cents, including sauce. Bread pudding. Slice a 5-cent loaf of bread, spread it lightly with 2 cents worth of butter, and lay it in a baking dish. Break 1 egg, cost 1 cent, into a bowl, add to it 2 ounces each of flour and sugar, cost 2 cents, a teaspoonful of salt, and a pint of milk, cost 4 cents. Mix, flavor to taste, pour over the bread, and bake the pudding about half an hour in a quick oven. It will be very nice and cost about 15 cents. Cup custards. Boil a pint of milk, cost 4 cents, with 2 ounces of sugar and half the yellow rind of a lemon, cost 3 cents. Meantime beat 4 eggs, cost 4 cents, and strain the milk into them. Mix thoroughly, strain again, and pour into cups. Set these in a baking pan containing hot water enough to reach halfway up the sides of the cups, and either set the pan over the fire until the custards are firm, or bake them in the oven. They will set in 12 or 15 minutes. The cost will be about 12 cents. Fruit dumpling. Make a nice suet crust as directed for suet dumplings on page 53. Roll it out about 1/4 inch thick, spread it with 10 cents worth of ripe fruit, 1/4 pound of sugar, cost 3 cents, and a teaspoonful of mixed spice. Roll it up, tie it in a cloth wet with scalding water and well floured next the dumpling, and boil it in a large kettle half full of boiling water for 2 hours, taking care that the pot does not stop boiling or remain uncovered, or the dumpling will be heavy. When it is done, take it from the pot, unroll it from the cloth, and serve it with a few cents worth of molasses. It will cost about 20 cents. Apple dumplings. Pare and core 5 cents worth of apples, keeping them whole. Make a suet crust as directed for suet dumplings on page 53. Roll it out and cut it in as many squares as you have apples. Sprinkle a little spice on the apples, form the corners of the pieces of paste up over them, pinch them together, tie each one in a floured cloth, and boil for 1 hour as directed in the previous receipt. Then take them from the pudding cloths and serve them with 5 cents worth of butter and sugar. They can be made for about 15 cents. Baked apple dumplings. Make a paste of half a pound of flour, cost 2 cents, 1/4 pound of butter, cost 8 cents, and enough cold water to wet it up, about half a pint. Roll it out very thin and fold it 4 times. Repeat this process twice, then put the paste in a cool place for 5 minutes, and roll and fold again. Do this 3 times, and then cut the paste in squares, and lay on each an apple prepared as above. Fold the paste over the apples, turn them bottom up on a baking sheet, brush them with a well-beaten egg, cost 1 cent. Sift over them an ounce of powdered sugar, cost 1 cent, and put them in a moderate oven to bake for 3/4 of an hour. They will cost about 18 cents and be very nice. Lemon dumplings. Sift 8 ounces of dried breadcrumbs, cost 3 cents. Mix them with the same quantity of very finely chopped suet, cost 4 cents. Pare off the thin yellow rind of a lemon, cost 2 cents. Chop it very fine and add it with the juice to the bread and suet. Mix in half a pound of sugar, cost 6 cents, 1 egg, cost 1 cent, and enough milk to make a stiff paste, about half a pint, cost 2 cents. Divide the paste into 6 equal balls, tie them in a floured cloth as directed for boiled apple dumplings, and boil them an hour. Serve them with 5 cents worth of butter and sugar or syrup. They will cost about 23 cents and are really delicious. Rice croquettes. Boil half a pound of well-washed rice, cost 5 cents, in 1 quart of cold water, with a level tablespoonful of salt. Half a pint of milk, cost 2 cents. Half the yellow rind of a lemon, or 2 inches of stick cinnamon, and 2 ounces of sugar, cost 2 cents, for half an hour. After it begins to boil, stirring it occasionally to prevent burning, take it from the fire, stir in one at a time the yolks of 3 eggs, cost 3 cents, and return to the fire for 10 minutes to set the egg. Then spread the rice on an oiled platter, laying it about an inch thick, and let it get cool enough to handle. When it is cool enough, turn it out of the platter upon some cracker dust spread on the table. Cut it in strips 1 inch wide and 3 inches long. Roll them into the shape of corks, dip them first in beaten egg, then in cracker dust, and fry them golden brown in plenty of smoking hot fat. Lay them on a napkin for a moment to free them from grease, put them on a dish, dust a little powdered sugar over them, and serve them. They will cost, including the last mentioned ingredients, about 20 cents. Fruit tarts. Stew 10 cents worth of fruit and 4 ounces of sugar together. Make some pastry according to the directions in the receipt for baked apple dumplings. Line deep pie plates with the paste, building up a rim of paste around each. Fill them with the stewed fruit and bake them about 3/4 of an hour in a moderate oven. 2 good-sized tarts can be made for 25 cents, and the fruit can be varied to suit the season of the year and the taste of the eaters. Rice cakes. Sift together 6 ounces each of rice and wheat flour, cost about 7 cents. Rub into them 4 ounces of lard or meat drippings, cost 4 cents. 4 eggs, cost 4 cents, and sufficient milk to make a thick cake batter. Beat it thoroughly, pour it into a greased cake pan, and bake it 1 hour. A good-sized cake will cost about 15 cents. Rock cakes. Mix well together 4 ounces each of butter and sugar, cost 12 cents. Add 4 ounces of well-washed currants, cost 3 cents. 1 pound of flour, cost 4 cents, and 3 eggs, cost 3 cents. Beat all these ingredients thoroughly, roll them into little balls or rocks, and bake them on a buttered baking pan. A good supply will cost about 22 cents. Caraway cake. Beat to a cream 4 ounces each of butter and sugar, cost 12 cents. Stir in 2 eggs, cost 2 cents. 1 gill of milk, cost 1 cent. 1 pound of sifted flour, cost 4 cents, and 5 cents worth of caraway seed. Bake the cake for 2 hours in a deep earthen dish, testing it with a clean broom splint to be sure it is done before you take it from the oven. It will cost about 24 cents. Soft gingerbread. Melt 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents, add it to half a pint of molasses, cost 5 cents, with 1 level teaspoonful each of ground cloves, cinnamon, and ginger, cost 1 cent. Dissolve 1 level teaspoonful of soda in half a pint of boiling water. Mix this with the molasses and lightly stir in half a pound of sifted flour, cost 2 cents. Line a cake pan with buttered paper, pour in the batter, which will be very thin, and bake it about half an hour, or until you can run a broom splint into it, and withdraw it clean. The cake, which will be a good size, will cost about 10 cents. Sweet biscuits. Rub 4 ounces of butter, cost 8 cents, into 1 pound of flour, cost 4 cents. Dissolve 4 ounces of sugar, cost 3 cents, in half a pint of warm milk, cost 2 cents. Pour this into the flour, mixing it smoothly, then dissolve half a level teaspoonful of cream of tartar in 1 gill of cold water, and stir it into the above ingredients. When they are thoroughly mixed, roll out the paste about 1/4 inch thick, cut it out in small round cakes, and bake them golden brown, at once, in a quick oven. A good supply will cost about 17 cents. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10 of 25-cent dinners for families of 6. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Betty B. 25-cent dinners for families of 6 by Juliet Corson. Dessert dishes. The previous chapter was devoted to cheap and good sweet dishes of the kind usually called dessert in this country. The dessert proper, however, consists of fruit, creams, ices, small and delicate cakes, fancy crackers, and confectionery. We give here directions for making some of these enjoyable delicacies at a very moderate rate. It must always be borne in mind that the prices quoted are those which prevail when the articles specified are in season, and consequently abundant and cheap. As apples are very plentiful and generally cheap, we shall begin with dishes made from them. Apple black caps. Pare a quart of nice apples, core them without breaking, set them side by side in a baking dish that will hold them, fill the centers with sugar, place 2 cloves in the top of each one, grate over them the yellow rind of a lemon or orange, and put them into a moderate oven, only until they are tender. Do not let them break apart. As soon as they are tender, take them from the oven, heat a fire shovel red hot, and hold it over them, near enough to blacken their tops. Serve either hot or cold. A porcelain-lined baking dish, or a gratin pan, is the best dish for cooking the black caps in, because either can be set upon a clean plate and sent to the table. If the apples have to be removed from the dish in which they were baked, they may be broken, and then the appearance of the dish will be spoiled. The flavor of the dish may be changed by varying the spice, and by occasionally using a little wine or brandy with the sugar. The cost of a dish large enough for half a dozen persons will be covered by 10 cents, unless it is made when apples are scarce and dear. Apple snow. Make this dish when eggs are cheap. Pare and core a quart of apples, cost 5 cents. Stew them to a pulp with just water enough to moisten them. Rub them through a sieve and sweeten them to taste. Beat the whites of 6 eggs, cost 6 cents, with 2 tablespoonfuls of powdered sugar, to a stiff froth. Beat the apple pulp to a froth, mix the egg and apple together very lightly, turning the bowl of the spoon over and over instead of stirring it around. Then beat them with an egg whisk until they look like snow. Pile the snow high in the center of a dish, putting it in by the tablespoonful, and taking care not to break it down. In the top of the heap of snow, put a fresh flower or a green sprig, and if you have any currant jelly, lay a few bits around the base. The effect of the dish is very pretty, and it can be made for about 15 cents. Apple cakes. Pare and core and slice a quart of apples. Price 5 cents. Stew them with half their weight in sugar, about 1 pound, cost about 12 cents. The grated rind and juice of a lemon, cost 2 cents. 1 ounce of butter, cost 2 cents, and a very little grated nutmeg. When they are tender, beat them with an egg whisk until they are light. Drop them by the dessert spoonful on buttered paper laid on a baking sheet, and bake them in a cool oven until they are firm, which will be in about 15 minutes. When they are cool, put them in a tin box until wanted for use. The cost will be about 20 cents. Cherry cheese. Put into a stone jar a pound of sound, ripe cherries with the stones removed. Cost about 10 cents. Cover the jar closely, set it in a saucepan half full of boiling water, and simmer it gently until the cherries are tender. Then take up the fruit, weigh it, put it into a preserving kettle with half a pound of finely sifted sugar. Cost about 8 cents. To every pound of fruit, add a dozen cherry kernels with the skins removed by scalding and rubbing in a clean cloth. Put the kettle over a slow fire and boil, stirring occasionally until the fruit is quite dry and clear. Meantime, rinse out some shallow jars with brandy, and when the fruit is done, put it into them, pressing it down tightly. Pour a very little brandy over the top, lay a little paper on each, then fit on the covers of the jars closely and keep in a dry, cool place. The above quantity will cost about 25 cents. Candied cherries. Choose a pound of perfectly sound, ripe cherries. Cost 10 cents, with the stalks and an occasional leaf attached. Wipe them with a clean, dry, soft cloth, dip the leaves and stems, but not the fruit, into boiling vinegar, and set them with the cherries upward in a cardboard perforated with holes to admit the stems, until the vinegar dries. Meantime, boil a pound of loaf sugar, cost about 15 cents, with a teaspoonful of cold water, using a thick porcelain-lined saucepan or copper sugar boiler. Skim until perfectly clear and test in the following way. Dip the thumb and forefinger into cold water and then quickly into the boiling sugar, withdrawing it instantly. Press the fingers together and then draw them apart. If the sugar forms a little thread between them, it is ready to use. If it does not, boil a few minutes longer and test again. When it is ready, dip the leaves and branches into it and dry them in the cardboard frame as directed above. Keep the sugar at the boiling point, and as soon as it forms a clear brittle thread between the fingers, when tested as above, dip the entire fruit into it, moving the cherries around so that the sugar completely covers them, and dry them, placed as above in the cardboard frame, in the mouth of a cool oven. Currant salad. Remove the stems from half a pound each of red and white currants, cost 10 cents, and pile them in regular layers high in the center of a shallow glass dish, sifting a little powdered sugar between each layer. The sugar will cost 2 or 3 cents. A gill of cream, cost 5 cents, may be poured over the top if desired. The dish should be tastefully ornamented with green leaves, and the salad kept very cool until wanted for use. The cost of a nice dishful will be about 18 cents. Iced currants. Beat the white of 1 egg, cost 1 cent, to a stiff froth. Mix it with 3 dessert spoonfuls of cold water. Dip into it carefully some perfect bunches of ripe red and white currants, which can be bought in season for 10 cents a pound. Drain each bunch a moment and then dust it well with powdered sugar. Lay each bunch carefully upon a large sheet of white paper so that there is plenty of room between the bunches, and set them in a cool, airy place for 5 hours. The sugar will partly crystallize upon the fruit, and the effect will be very pretty. The cost of a good-sized dish will be about 15 cents. Compote of damsons. Wipe 1 quart of sound, ripe damsons, cost 10 cents, with a clean, dry cloth. Drop them, one by one, into the following syrup. Make a syrup by melting 1 pound of loaf sugar, cost 15 cents, with 1 pint of water. Stir in the white of an egg, cost 1 cent, and boil the syrup 15 minutes, skimming it clear. Simmer the plums in this syrup until they are tender, about 5 minutes, but do not let them break. Take the plums up carefully and arrange them in a heap on a shallow dish, letting the syrup boil about 10 minutes, until it is quite thick. Then remove it from the fire, cool it a little, and pour it over the plums. The dish will cost about 25 cents. Stuffed dates. Remove the stones from a pound of fine dates, cost 10 cents. By cutting them open at one side, remove the shells and skins from half a pound of almonds, cost 10 cents. The skins can easily be rubbed off by first pouring boiling water on the almond kernels. Replace the date stones with the almonds and arrange the dates neatly on a shallow dish. Dust a little powdered sugar over them and keep them in a cool, dry place till ready to use. The dish will cost 23 cents. Stewed figs. Dissolve 4 ounces of powdered sugar, cost 3 cents, in 1 pint of cold water, and flavor with a few drops of any essence preferred. Put into it a pound of nice figs, cost 10 cents. Heat slowly and stew gently for about 2 hours, or until the figs are tender. Eat hot with a dish of boiled rice or serve cold. The cost will be less than 15 cents. Compote of gooseberries. Choose a quart of large, sound, ripe, green gooseberries. Cost 10 cents. Remove the stems and tops, throw them into boiling water for 2 minutes, drain them, let them lay 3 minutes in cold water containing a tablespoonful of vinegar to restore their color, and then drain them quite dry. Meantime, make a thick syrup by boiling 1 pound of sugar, cost 12 cents, with 1 pint of water. As soon as the syrup has boiled about 10 minutes, put in the gooseberries and boil them gently until just tender, about 10 minutes. Then pour both fruit and syrup into an earthen or glass dish. Cool and use. The dish will cost less than 25 cents. Gooseberry cheese. Remove the tops and stalks from 2 quarts of ripe red gooseberries. Cost 20 cents. Put them in a moderate oven till soft enough to rub through a sieve. Then add to them 1/4 their weight of sugar. Set them over the fire to boil gently for half an hour, stirring them constantly and skimming till clear. Then put by the tablespoonful on plates and dry in the mouth of a cool oven. Pack, when quite cool, in a tight box between sheets of white wrapping paper. The above quantity will cost about 25 cents. Gooseberry fool. Remove tops and stalks from 2 quarts of gooseberries. Boil them with 3/4 of their weight in sugar and half a pint of cold water until soft enough to pulp through a sieve. Then mix the pulp with a pint of milk or cream, if a more expensive dish is desired, and put into an earthen or glass dish to cool. Serve cold. The above quantity will cost about 25 cents. Grape jelly. Dissolve 1 ounce of gelatin, cost 8 cents, in half a pint of cold water. Break 1 pound and a half of grapes, cost 10 cents, in an earthen bowl with a wooden spoon. Strain the juice without pressing the grapes. Through clean muslin 3 times. Put the juice into a preserve kettle with half a pound of loaf sugar, cost 8 cents, and the dissolved isinglass, and boil it 10 minutes. Rub a jelly mold with pure salad oil. Add 2 tablespoonfuls of brandy, cost 3 cents, to the jelly. Pour it into the mold and cool until the jelly sets firm. The above ingredients will make about a pint and a half of jelly, and will usually cost about 25 cents, for the above estimate is rather more than the average cost. Green gage compote. Remove the skin from a quart of very ripe green gages, cost 15 cents. Put them in a glass dish, sprinkle them over with a pound of powdered sugar, cost 10 cents, and let them stand in a cool place 4 hours, until a nice syrup has been formed. The dish is delicious and costs about 25 cents. Pineapple julep. Pare and slice a very ripe pineapple, which in season will cost about 10 cents. Lay it in a glass dish, pour over it the juice of 1 orange, cost 2 cents, the juice of 1 lemon, cost 2 cents, a gill of any fruit syrup, cost about 5 cents, and 2 tablespoonfuls of rum, cost 3 cents. Sprinkle it with a little powdered sugar, cool it on the ice, and serve it cold. It will cost about 25 cents. Lemon snow. Soak 1 ounce of gelatin, cost 8 cents, in 1 pint of cold water for half an hour. Peel the yellow rind from 3 lemons, cost 6 cents, and squeeze and strain their juice. Put the rind and juice of the lemons into a saucepan with 8 ounces of loaf sugar, cost 8 cents, and stir until the sugar and isinglass are quite dissolved. Pour it into a bowl and let it cool and begin to grow firm. Then add the whites of 3 eggs, cost 3 cents, and beat to a stiff froth. Pile by the tablespoon high in the center of a glass dish. It is pretty and delicious, and costs only about 25 cents. Melon compote. Make a syrup by boiling 1 pound of sugar, cost 10 cents, with half a pint of water. Pare and slice a spicy muskmelon, cost 5 cents, and put it into the syrup with a little wine, cost 5 cents. Boil gently for 10 minutes, take up the melon in a glass dish, cool the syrup a little and pour it over the melon. Serve the compote cold. It is delicious and costs only about 25 cents. Orange salad. Peel 6 oranges, cost 12 cents, slice them, place them in rings in a glass dish, sprinkle them with 3 ounces of powdered sugar, cost 2 cents, pour over them a little wine and brandy, and let them stand overnight in a cool place. A good dish full will cost about 20 cents. Orange and apple compote. Pare and slice very thin 3 oranges, cost 6 cents, and 3 apples, cost 3 cents, removing the seeds from both. Lay the slices in rings in a glass dish. Cover with the following syrup and cool. Boil the orange peel in half a pint of water with 4 ounces of sugar, cost 4 cents, until the syrup is clear. Add a tablespoonful of brandy to it, cool it a little, and pour it over the sliced fruit. The dish is very nice when iced and costs about 15 cents. Peach salad. Pare and quarter a quart of ripe peaches, cost 10 cents. Lay them in a heap in a shallow glass dish, squeeze over them the juice of an orange, cost 2 cents, and sprinkle them with powdered sugar, cost 2 cents. Put them on the ice to get very cold. A large dishful can be prepared for 15 cents. Cold compote of pears. Peel and slice thin a quart of Bartlett pears, cost 15 cents. Lay them in a glass dish, pour over them a little wine, and sprinkle them plentifully with powdered sugar. Let them stand in a cool place for an hour before using them. A nice dish will cost less than 20 cents. Stewed prunelles. Put a pound of prunelles, cost 15 cents, in enough boiling water to cover them, and stew them gently for 1 hour. Take them up with a skimmer, strain their juice, return it to the fire with 4 ounces of loaf sugar, cost 4 cents. The yellow rind and juice of 1 lemon, cost 2 cents, and a glass of wine. Skim until clear, add the prunelles and stew again for 1 hour. Take up the prunelles in a glass dish, cool the syrup a little and strain it over them. Cool before using. The dish can be made for about 25 cents. Quince cakes. Wash some quinces, boil them in enough water to cover them until they are tender enough to rub through a sieve. To each quart add 1.5 pounds of loaf sugar, place the mixture over the fire and heat to the boiling point, stirring it constantly, but do not let it boil. Oil some plates, spread the quince upon them, and dry it in the mouth of a cool oven. Then cut it in cakes, pack it in a tin box between layers of white wrapping paper. When it is thoroughly cold, and keep it in a cool, dry place. A good dishful can be made for 25 cents. Quince snow. Boil some nice quinces until tender. Peel them, rub them through a sieve with a wooden spoon, and add to each pound a pound of powdered sugar, cost 10 cents, and the whites of 3 eggs, cost 3 cents. Beat with an egg whisk to a stiff froth and pile by the tablespoonful in the center of a shallow glass dish. A nice dishful can be made for about 25 cents. Iced raspberries. Beat the white of 1 egg, cost 1 cent, with 2 tablespoonfuls of cold water. Pick over a quart of fine ripe raspberries, cost 10 cents. Dip them one by one into the egg and roll them in powdered sugar. Lay them on white paper spread on a baking sheet so that they do not touch, and dry them in a cold, dry place, sifting a little more sugar over them, if they seem to grow moist. When the berries are in season, 25 cents will cover the cost of a large dish. Raspberry salad. Pick over a quart of ripe raspberries, cost 10 cents. Pile them high in the center of a glass dish, pour over them a glass of wine, cost 5 cents, dust them with an ounce of powdered sugar, cost 1 cent, and keep on the ice till used. A good dishful can be made for about 20 cents. Compote of strawberries. Carefully pick over a quart of ripe strawberries, cost 10 cents. Put them in an earthen dish, pour over them a syrup made by boiling 1/4 pound of sugar, cost 4 cents, with 1 gill of water, for 10 minutes. Let the berries stand in the syrup for 1 hour, then drain them and pile them in a heap in a shallow glass dish. Add to the syrup the juice of 1 orange, cost 2 cents, or a glass of wine. Boil it up and cool it a little and strain it over the berries. Cool and use. This delicious dish costs about 15 cents. Strawberry drops. Rub some ripe strawberries through a fine sieve with a wooden spoon. Add 2 ounces of this juice to half a pound of powdered sugar. Cost 5 cents. Put the mixture into a saucepan and stir it over the fire until it begins to simmer. Remove it from the fire and stir it briskly for 5 minutes. Oil some paper, lay it on a baking sheet, drop the strawberries on it by the salt spoonful. Dry them in the mouth of a cool oven. Keep them between layers of white paper in a cool place. A good supply can be made for 25 cents. Compote of mixed fruit. Boil half a pound of loaf sugar, cost 8 cents, with 1 gill of cold water for 10 minutes. Pick over half a pound of red currants, cost 5 cents, and a pint of raspberries, cost 5 cents, and simmer them in the syrup for 10 minutes. Take up the fruit on a glass dish, cool the syrup a little, and pour it over the fruit. The dish will cost less than 20 cents. Fruit juice. Rub ripe fruit through a sieve with a wooden spoon, and then strain it free from skins and seeds. To every pound add 1/4 pound of loaf sugar. Mix well, pour it into wide-mouthed glass bottles, and set them in a pan with cold water reaching to the necks of the bottles. Set the pan over the fire and let the water come to a boil. Remove the pan and let the bottles stand in the water until they are quite cold. Then cork them tightly and seal them with wax or resin. Keep them in a cool, dry place. This juice added to ice water and sweetened to taste makes a delicious sherbet. The end. End of Chapter 10. End of 25-cent Dinners for Families of 6 by Juliet Corson.